Chapter 1885. The fire elementals are on our side, right? They're all mixed up, how do we fight them? The tank gunners were dumbfounded. The messenger above spat a mouthful of saliva at them. Don't joke around. Don't use holy light cannons, use pure tungsten core armor-piercing bullets. We create explosions to help our own people, our own fire elemental warriors. The bombardment resumed, and the battlefront on Utgard's side stabilized. In the face of the ferocious Neltharion clones, the demigod Kaisi made a move for the first time. He was clearly showing off his love with Caponia recently, but he acted like a lifelong member of the FFF group and directly burned them to teach those wings of light a lesson. The battle with the clones was a little lackluster. The clones had good attack, defense, and regeneration abilities, but they lacked decisive ultimate moves or special skills. At most, they could cause trouble for the Alliance and bully the Alliance subbases that did not have demigod-level combat power. Against Kaisi, defeat was only a matter of time. In fact, even Neltharion himself did not expect those clones to be able to kill the powerhouses of the Alliance. After fighting for so long, the old Wings of Light also knew that the powerhouses of the Alliance were not only very resilient, but also liked to stick together. That exaggerated teleportation link made it impossible for him to create a diversion. Unless his main body was there was no way to seal the surrounding space and cause the teleportation spell to fail. All the clones were used to buy time and stall the powerhouses of the Alliance. The real main direction of attack of the Armageddon was, of course, the Dragonbone Wilderness to the north of the New Vortex. In the face of hundreds of thousands of Earth elementals and over 10,000 adult Twilight dragons, the Dragon Sleep Temple put on a huge lineup that was rarely seen so far. In the Void battlefield above the planet's atmosphere, only the minimum number of scouts and Void Fortress defense troops were left. Those dragons with rich combat experience were all called back. It was rare in history for so many dragons to gather together like today. The last time there was such a scene was back in the ancient war 10,000 years ago, when the five-colored dragons gathered and angrily attacked the Burning Legion. Now, even they themselves were shocked by the magnificent scene of the dragons flying into the air and gathering together. The red dragons, yellow dragons, and green dragons lined up in order, the blue dragons with a smaller number rushed into the sky, and the shabbiest group of adult black dragons were at the back of the formation. In any case, the 5 dragon tribes that were once divided were now united as one. It wasn't just the standard chromatic dragons. Even the lesser dragons joined the Sleeping Dragon Coalition under Alexstras's call. They included the archosaurs that lived in the ice and snow of Northrend, the dinosaurs of the Ungoro crater, and so on. Some dragons spread their wings wide enough to blot out the sky, while some dragons were as small as mosquitoes. Regardless of whether they were old dragons that had experienced the vicissitudes of life or young dragons that had just learned how to fly, they all joined the team. This was an order from the dragon aspects. However, the dragon that took to the air first did not immediately pounce on the invading enemy. Instead, it circled above the mountains and used the air currents to wait for its brothers to arrive. These dragons filled the sky, forming layers of ranks from high to low. They circled in a regular route to avoid colliding with each other. On the ground, large batches of Draconians and Half-Draconians were pouring out of the Dragon Slumber Shrine's gates one after another. They formed a neat square formation and formed the core of the defensive line on the ground. On the other hand, the terrestrial dinosaurs that could not fly consciously circled around and gathered on both sides, tentatively forming a formation. Faced with this scene, anyone who witnessed this scene would think that they had seen the end of the world. Perhaps it really was the end of the world. The members of the dragon race knew that the great traitor Nesario had done all kinds of evil. This deadly poisonous thorn was stuck in the throats of every dragon, and no one would be indifferent to that kind of stinging pain. The dragon's blood was boiling, and their thunderous roars resounded through the sky. Everyone was waiting for the upcoming battle. The enemy's boss, Nesario, had not yet appeared, so naturally, there would not be a Dragon King on the Sleeping Dragon Coalition's side. At this stage, the 4-colored dragon race's second-in-command, led by Krasis, was holding down the fort. Krasis did not know that he had escaped death because of Du's interference. He was shuttling back and forth between the various phalanxes with Collego's fiancée, Matagosa, and the other second-in-command, coordinating the various dragon race armies. Krasus was a little ashamed. The Dragon Slumber Shrine had long been accustomed to magical communication, but the other more primitive dragon race still remained at the level of shouting orders. Fortunately, the command of the opposing earth elemental creatures was even worse, otherwise, there was no telling what would have happened. Compared to the chaotic dragon coalition, the human fleet hovering in the sky further north was much quieter and orderly. This fleet, 10,000 meters away, would provide the long-range support that the dragon race lacked the most. Krasus was worried, so he used magic to confirm it. His spirit connected to the magic network. "Your Majesty Proudmoore, can you hear me?" "Very clear, Krasus." Jaina sat helplessly on a throne that was obviously arranged in the bridge. "That's right." The Alliance was really lacking fleet commanders. It should be said that there was a shortage of commander-level talents with more than 100,000 people. Originally, Jaina was a standard mage girl, but she had to be pulled in. She was now sitting on the flagship of the Alliance's new Iron Cross fleet, Bismarck. Jaina did not know what the hell Bismarck was. The name was set by Dumoke, and she could not change it. In other aspects, Duque was very tolerant, but when it came to the naming of the ship, he definitely had the final say. This steel beast hovering in the sky not only had the traditional cannons of the Alliance, but it also had a very exaggerated thing that needed a Breaking Dawn Archmage to control. Jaina sighed. "What about the Dragon King?" "Still arguing, but there will be a result soon." At the highest level of the Dragon Slumber Shrine, the 5 Dragon Kings were still arguing. "Damn, is Duque not back yet?" Alexstrasza was indeed a little anxious. Her red eyes stared at Nozdorm. The Space Dragon King was still expressionless. "I will know when he completes the mission. Just don't get lost in the river of time like last time. I heard that he came back for a few years. The Dragon Slumber Shrine can't wait for a few years." The Red Dragon Queen had the urge to flip the table. "Sister, calm down. It is our Emerald Dragon Holy Land that is under attack now." Isra still looked calm and composed. The Green Dragon Holy Land was by the sea. It and the new Hearth Valley next to it naturally became the first target of Nesario's Armageddon army. However, because Vashch was personally guarding the shallow waters by the sea, there was no way for Neltharion to let the earth elementals land by walking on the seabed. He could only use the human cannon method to shoot batches of earth elementals ashore. Chapter 1886. Unexpectedly, Isra was kind enough to allow the Alliance to build a fortress next to the Holy Land, which helped the Green Dragons instead. In the new Hearth Valley to the east of the Emerald Holy Land, Duque worked overtime before he left. He asked the Alliance to deploy more than 500 dual 113mm anti-aircraft cannons on the southern coastal mountain wall. These anti-aircraft cannons had a larger caliber than the main cannon of a tank. Although they did not have the high firing rate of the 40mm bang-bang cannon used by the warship, which was about 1 round per second, this new type of anti-aircraft cannon was very powerful. They formed a dense anti-air net, and almost half of the earth elemental creatures that were thrown out were shot down. As long as they hit, most of the stone people flying in the air would fall into the sea. Sea beasts like the giant octopus that had been waiting under the water would swarm up and drag the earth elemental creatures away to kill them. This greatly bought time for the Dragon Sleep Temple to set up the formation. When a large number of earth elemental creatures poured into the new Hearth Valley, the Alliance abandoned this fortress, and their personnel began to withdraw to the Emerald Holy Land next door. The Naga troops led by the Deepwater Lord Carathres stayed behind to fight the earth elemental creatures. At the top of the Dragon Sleep Temple, Alexstrasza was finally convinced. Isra said, "I know your determination to defend the Dragon Sleep Temple, sister. In fact, we all have the same feeling. But without the soul of the dragon, we can't kill Nethario at all. So my opinion is, unless Nethario attacks the top of the Dragon Sleep Temple, we don't make a move." The Red Dragon sister was extremely conflicted. This is not the first time. In order to create the strongest weapon in history, We must dedicate our essence to fight against the most powerful traitor in the history of the five-colored dragons, Nethario. If that's not enough, we still have claws, teeth, and other weapons to attack him. Isn't that right? Isra's calm words calmed his sister's restless mood. Alexstrasza smiled bitterly. I suddenly feel like you're more like the head of the five-colored dragons than me. No, it's just that you're under too much pressure, sister. Nozdormu had facial paralysis most of the time. He was a generation lower than Kalegos, so he couldn't talk to him. Onyxia, on the other hand, became bolder. It's okay, we can still order the wilderness demigod around. Although those guys are a little weak, they can still hold on for a long time. The only demigod in the wilderness who could fight in the air was Avienna. In fact, the raven goddess was far inferior to the weakest of the five dragon aspects, Kalegos. Instead of letting them be bombarded by Nesario outside, it was better to place them on the first floor of the entrance to the Wormwrist Shrine. The powerful spatial seal made it so that no matter who entered the Dragonsleep Shrine's main entrance, they would have to walk. Alexstrasza's face turned red. If we get attacked there, then the Dragon Slumber Temple will lose all face. Isra was rather practical. Didn't we already lose face when Nesario betrayed us? Her sister was right. The Red Dragon Queen was speechless. But at the end of the day, everyone unconsciously shifted their attention back to Duque. Even Isra was muttering to himself, Duque, you bastard. I won't forgive you for coming back so late. Onyxia, on the other hand, did not seem to care. After entering the Wormwrist Shrine, she was basically in human form. She had no intention of being a dragon at all. She seemed to be very leisurely crossing her legs, her right index finger twirling the tip of her long black curly hair, twirling and twirling it. Her face revealed a honey of trust that the other dragons could not understand. It's okay, until the world is destroyed, I will absolutely believe in Duque. No one knew that at this moment, this once incomparably cunning female black dragon was undergoing the final interrogation of her dragon heart. This concerned whether she would really open her heart and completely believe in a man in the future. The ancient dragons all knew that the Dragon King could not be mobilized. Otherwise, once they needed to inject power into the dragon soul and were held up, it would not be fun. They could only rely on themselves, and the alliance of the mortal races that many dragons were not willing to believe in more than a decade ago. After the Destruction Army realized that attacking the Emerald Dragon Holy Land in the southeast of the Wormwrist Shrine was not effective, they first destroyed the Walrus People's Moyaki port in order to have a better landing, and then went all the way north. Although tens of thousands of stone men were left to attack the Azure Dragon Holy Land in the southwest of the Wormwrist Shrine, the main force was divided into two groups. One group went straight through the two holy lands and went straight to the Wormwrist Shrine. The other larger group went around to the west, through the snow-covered drifting snow forest, and attacked the Wormwrist Shrine. In the flagship command room of Bismarck, Jaina sighed. What's wrong? Egwene asked. Jaina rested her chin on her right hand and propped her head up. It'll be fine if Duque doesn't go for a few years this time. Phew! Aren't you all full of energy to prove that the Alliance can fight against evil without Duque? Egwene laughed. Nowadays, in the Alliance, that's a paradox. Jaina laughed lightly. Holding the weapons and equipment that Duque led the way in developing, using the taxes that Duque brought in to revitalize the economy to nurture an army, and shouting, we can do it without Duque, isn't that a joke? Egwene shrugged. That's true. All right, there's no time to be sad. At least we have to hold on and make sure that the situation doesn't collapse. Jaina looked at the magical screens that had a sci-fi feel to it, and saw the position of the enemy's main force. She waved her hand. All fleet main cannons, prepare to fire. A minute later, the sound of cannons that seemed to come from the distant horizon faintly came to the dragons, and then countless cannonballs that were as dense as a swarm of locusts whistled past not far from the feet of the flying dragons. It wasn't just the roar of cannons, but also the roar of modern technology. Artillery skills that had been tempered thousands of times, coupled with the dual guidance of technology and magic, guided each cannonball through the space between the flying dragons and the earth dragons, blasting into the group of twilight dragons in the sky. It was almost a replica of the aerial battle between the Fearless Fortress and Utgard Castle. The new Holy Light version of the tungsten core armor-piercing shell had a miraculous effect on the Twilight Dragons. After 3 rounds of rapid firing, the Twilight Dragon formation in the sky became a pitiful basket. Krasis was a little excited and shouted with magic amplification, "It's time! Chromatic dragons!" This was the agreed signal. 3 rounds of simultaneous firing, and then immediately snatching control of the air. Tens of thousands of dragons flapped their wings and accelerated. Like countless heavy machine guns, they ferociously plunged into the group of Twilight Dragons that had become sparse and messy. The enemy's scattered formation and unstable morale gave the Sleeping Dragon Alliance a great advantage. Chapter 1887. On the other hand, Krasis and the other ancient dragons were entangled with Nisario's avatars. They flapped their wings and made all sorts of difficult hovers in the air. Some of them even made sudden stops and flew backward. They kept using their dragon breaths to destroy the ever-growing avatars of Darkwing. Of course, it looked a little futile. After so many battles, both sides basically had a pattern. The size of the avatars of Darkwing also depended on the size of the avatars. If they were twice the size of an ordinary ancient dragon, then the ancient dragon could still win with numbers. 3 to 5 times the size of the avatars could be dealt with by a single guardian, aspect dragon, or demigod of the Alliance or the Sleeping Dragon Alliance. If it was more than 5 times, they would have to gather many big shots to deal with it. Now, these were basically big guys that were about 5 times the size, but the demigods of the Sleeping Dragon Alliance could not attack due to special reasons. This was really hard on the ancient dragons. However, it was not like the Alliance did not have any countermeasures. No one noticed that Jaina's flagship, Bismarck, had already sneaked forward. It was less than 2 kilometers away from the main battlefield where Nisario's avatars were. This was definitely a very close distance for an aerial battle. No one discovered the Bismarck, because the 4 ancient green dragons, Layson, Amalise, Tyrell, and Isodra, had joined hands to create a magic formation that perfectly concealed the human battleship with its illusion and aura concealment. Back then, the 4 nightmare dragons had always played the role of the backbone of the Green Dragon army after escaping the fate of death. Under Isra's most trusted male green dragon, second-in-command Iranicus, they were the most capable of fighting in the Green Dragon army. Those avatars that were not directly controlled by Nisario did not notice the danger that was close at hand at this time. On Bismarck, Master Craftsman Gerben was sweating profusely. He nervously paid attention to the data of the battleship and finally nodded at Jaina. Jaina pressed a red button on the flagship beside the captain's seat. The moment she pressed it, the entire battleship began to change shape. As a test ship, Bismarck was a rare flying battleship that was purely powered by magic power. After abandoning the high-powered propellers pulled by diesel engines, it used an anti-gravity magic engine similar to the Dalagens. Being completely connected to the weave also meant that without it, the entire ship would be like a stranded whale, unable to move at all. On the other hand, as long as it was within the range of the weave, with the support of Pharaoh who had extremely high authority, the Bismarck would be the representative of the weave. The upper and lower layers of the ship have separated. The connection to the weave is working. Confirmation of highest authority in the weave. Magic circuit warm-up test. Test normal. In the command deck, a group of female communications soldiers and radiant moon mages were busy. As one of the greatest experiments in combining technology and magic, Bismarck was displaying its extraordinary side to the world. The largest hull, which was 241.55 meters long and 36 meters wide, was neatly opened near the waterline of a ship. The opening was so flat that one could tell that it wasn't a crack, but that it had the structure to open itself. It looked like the main body of the ship was slowly separating from the bottom of the ship. There were still some metal pumps and hooks connecting the upper and lower parts of the ship, looking a little like the fangs of a dragon. However, The huge cannon that was exposed in the air and sandwiched between the two sections of the ship made the 4 ancient dragons who were on the verge of becoming the nightmare dragons feel their hearts palpitate. This huge cannon that was more than 200 meters long and 10 meters in diameter almost pierced through the entire hull. It was obviously something that had nothing to do with science. Anyone with the slightest bit of elemental sensing would be able to sense that the weave had opened up 12 huge ports in the void around it. The mana that these ports could send through every second was equivalent to the mana of an adult blue dragon. As Duke's woman, Jaina had the highest status among the secondary controllers of the weave. She could use as much mana as she wanted, but it didn't exceed the upper limit of her control. If not for the 4 ancient green dragons acting as a cover, just the mana fluctuations from the weave would be enough to make the army of destruction jump in anger. A huge amount of mana was quickly injected into the huge cannon in the belly of the Bismarck, charging it. The frost element from the water elemental realm quickly lit up the mysterious Titan runes on the cannon's body. As if it was a lighting ceremony at night, the runes on the cannon lit up from the stern all the way to the muzzle at the bow. In the command room, Gerben was sweating profusely as he stared at the data interface of the various main cannons. The pressure on the metal walls of Area K3 is too high. If we go any further, it'll explode. Got it? Jaina's face was expressionless as beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. The welding process for Area B7 is not up to standard. Damn it. I'm going to kill the brat in charge of that area. Gerben continued to shout. Got it. Jaina was furious. Controlling such a powerful new magic cannon was definitely not as easy as others thought. Magic cannons were nothing new. The Dalajan had always had them. Just like how traditional cannons were divided into calibers and ammunition, magic cannons were also divided into different grades. The Dalajan's old magic cannons were powered by stored mana. It was just like how Duke had stored his spare mana in magic crystals a long time ago and used it to save the day when necessary. This method was relatively more stable and safe. However, in order to not be like how the Dalajan and Kel, Thuzad's Naxxramas bombarded each other, the Dalajan magic cannons had no choice but to reduce the power of the magic cannons. The modified magic cannons on the Bismarck were even more daring. The body of the cannon was only a medium to temporarily store mana. A large amount of elemental filtration and stabilization work was left to the weave. This was only an experimental stage. In reality, Khadgar, the manager of the weave, and Jaina, the person with the highest authority in the outside world of the weave, were working together to launch the magic cannons. If the experiment was successful, the Alliance would be able to equip magic cannons on a large scale in the future. After all, cannons that used TNT were considered kinetic weapons. Compared to energy weapons like magic cannons, both had their own advantages. Walking on 2 legs was much better than relying on just one move. 80% charged, but the cannon can't hold on much longer. Gerben shouted again. Alright. Sigh of the Aurora Goddess, fire. Jaina finally punched the red firing button. The huge cylindrical cannon trembled. The next moment, the unique white light of the frost element poured out from the round obsidian cannon's muzzle. This new type of ore collected from Uldum displayed excellent resistance to the cold. In an instant, it was as if the goddess of winter had descended. Chapter 1888. The white iciness conquered the distance of 2,000 meters in one breath and shot towards the target. The 2 Neltharion clones that were lured into the muzzle were hit directly. The fangs of the white icy cold energy directly bit through the dragon skin of the Deathwing clone. The dragon-like limbs that were still shaking and baring their fangs a moment ago became stiff and motionless. The cold of absolute zero penetrated every cell in the body of the Deathwing clone in 0.01 seconds, and what was even more terrifying was the elemental erosion that followed. If anyone could slice the body tissue of the Deathwing clone and put it under a microscope, they would clearly see that the originally violent, rapidly proliferating and dividing cells had suddenly become as slow as an old woman. The water in the cells all turned into icicles, piercing the cell wall of every cell like a hedgehog. The same thing was happening to every single cell in his body. The huge dragon body that was noisy and full of disgusting shaking a second ago became deathly still under the sweep of the cold current. Without a sound, the gigantic dragon clone turned into a large ice sculpture, which made the dragon feel very unhappy. The ice sculpture that lost its support fell from a height of 1,000 meters to the ground. Crack! The two Deathwing clones were directly shattered. Oh, 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 oh! The shocking scene in the magic mirror directly made the Alliance soldiers who witnessed this scene reach a climax. They clenched their fists, raised their arms, and shouted loudly. Confirmed that targets 1 and 3 have been completely destroyed. The voice of the monitor girl spread throughout the bridge of the Bismarck. Phew! Jaina and Jurban's tense hearts finally relaxed. At this point, killing a Deathwing clone was not something to be proud of. What was worth being proud of was the fact that with the combination of magic and technology, he had killed a demigod-level monster at the Breaking Dawn level. Killing enemies of a higher level was something that could only be encountered by chance since ancient times. In particular, it was even more difficult to normalize this kind of behavior. Under Duque's suggestion, mortals were working hard to make this impossible possible with their own wisdom and creativity. Before Duque left for ancient times, he once said, "Azeroth has its own planet's will. When a planet is plagued with disasters, the planet will release the restrictions it has set up, allowing more mortals to have the space and opportunities to break through." It was foreseeable that there would be more Breaking Dawn wizards one day. Although the streets won't be filled with Breaking Dawns, I reckon that it won't be a problem for the Alliance to nurture a dozen or so Breaking Dawns. With just a Breaking Dawn Great Wizard holding the fort and the support of the giant warships and cannons, they had the battle prowess to threaten a demigod. What a magnificent feat of leaps and bounds! Being immersed in this magnificent feat and legend, the great gnome craftsman Jurban felt a sense of bliss. Jaina was the only one who was more clear-headed. Transfer the battle data immediately. Bismarck left the scene at top speed. Nesario will probably go crazy. We have to save this prototype as much as possible. Weapons that had not been tested in actual combat were mostly trash. As long as the experiment was generally successful, the subsequent modifications would be a piece of cake, provided that the most crucial prototype was preserved. Nesario seemed to have also discovered the need to destroy this strange human creation. More clones began to emerge from the southern vortex of Dragonbone Wasteland. At that moment, no one noticed that the Alliance's plan was still going on. What is the most important thing in modern warfare? Air supremacy. Neither the Sleeping Dragon Coalition Army nor the Armageddon Army realized why the Alliance was so eager to eliminate the Twilight Dragons in the air. Although the Twilight Dragons could be mass-produced like instant noodles, the number of Twilight Dragons that could be dispatched per unit of time was limited. This depended on the number of Twilight Dragons that could serve as commanders, as well as the upper limit of Nesario's willpower. Even the Sleeping Dragon Temple itself did not notice that Duque had thrown out a set of calculations before leaving. If the base number of adult Twilight Dragons was set to 1, then the combat power of a Twilight Dragon was equivalent to that of an ancient dragon. Together with the adult dragons that he could control, there were basically 300. Then, the maximum number that Nesario could command fluctuated between 12,000 and 20,000. This depended on the distance between his main body and the group of Twilight Dragons, as well as the complexity of the situation. This meant that Nesario could only command about 10,000 adult dragons to fight at most. Any more and the undisciplined Twilight Dragons would let loose and act recklessly. There were 3 major battles going on at the same time. Once the Twilight Dragons in the sky above the main battlefield were cleared, a new batch of Twilight Dragons would replace them, and there would be a vacuum above the battlefield for about 5 minutes. At an altitude of 4,000 meters, a giant transport ship of the Alliance began to drop magic nuclear bombs. In fact, this thing had nothing to do with nuclear energy. At this stage, the Alliance was far from being a nuclear in terms of power supply or science and technology. This could not stop Duze's yearning for big bombs. Since Nesario also knew that he could not destroy the Sleeping Dragon Temple with just the Twilight Dragons, and instead bet on the Earth Elementals from the Deep Rock continent, he just had to blow up the Earth Elementals. Little Fatty number 2, fell with a loud bang. Not a single twilight dragon, not even Nisario himself, who was hiding in the dark, realized how terrifying this magic bomb was. The last time the Alliance sent out such a big bomb, it was during the wrath of the Lich King, when the tribe rebelled. Winterspring was a cold and remote place, and there were no twilight believers. When the iconic mushroom cloud rose, Nisario was dumbfounded. On the land covered in ice and snow, colorful flames were dancing on the ground and in the air. A few seconds later, the terrifying shock wave set off by the mixture of elements and explosives swept over. Shaking, explosions, ear-piercing noises, everything became a symbol of the tragic loss of the Earth Elemental Army. In the open space where the Earth Elemental creatures gathered, Little Fatty Number 2 exploded in the middle of the giant Earth Elemental elite group that had gathered there. The core area was directly turned into a huge crater with a diameter of 500 meters. Naturally, the Earth Elementals in that place did not even have their bones left. With a series of loud bangs, rubble flew in the army of stone people, and the stones that were blown away fell on the heads and bodies of their companions like hailstones. There were no continuous screams. The Earth Elemental creatures landed on the beach in silence and died silently. This was just the beginning, not the end. More and more little fatty bombs were thrown down, and the ground rose into the sky, dazzling the dragons. Finally, the real Nisario roared and rose into the air from the huge sea vortex. His voice echoed over and over again in the entire Dragonbone waste. My brothers and sisters, it's time to settle the score. Chapter 1889. Never reason with a madman, or he will pull you into the world of Deepwell Ice and kill you instantly with his better skills. It was clear that he was the first to be driven mad by the whispers of the ancient gods and betrayed the Dragon Slumber Shrine. However, in his long-winded description, it became that after the battle at the Dark Portal, the four dragon aspects had cooperated with the despicable and shameless Duke Marcus and joined forces with the rebellious Onyxia to murder him in order to seize his throne. Now he was the one who set off the flames of revenge. Alexstrasza, who was watching this scene from the top of the Wormwrist Shrine, gritted her teeth so hard that they almost broke. Nonsense. Nosdormu was not angry at all. It doesn't matter what he says. No dragon in their right mind will approve of him. What we are worried about now is whether this Nisario is the real deal and whether our allies can stop him. Isra stared at the Deathwing in the magic mirror for a long time, then smiled bitterly and shook his head. I can't tell. He and his clone also have the same crazy will. He is no longer an existence that I can distinguish between the real and the fake with my power. However, the Dragon Kings were certain that at least the Deathwing in the magic mirror was very similar to the real deal. He also had the constantly proliferating dragon limbs like the clone. This was like a kind of decaying scabies that completely affected the city. The biggest difference between him and the other clones was not his size, but the black source armor on his body. This mysterious black metal could only be found in the newly developed Aldum and other places. The only thing that was known was that this source not only had the effect of stabilizing certain special energies, but it was also very hard. It was so hard that even the Dragon King's claws could not easily pierce through it. At this moment, after seeing Nisario's iron chin, Onyxia said, "It's my father, there's no doubt about it." Alexstrasza's eyes lit up. You feel the blood connection? No, Duque mentioned the term iron chin. I didn't know before, but I know now. It's him. The Black Dragon Princess was very sure. The Red Dragon Queen frowned. After a few seconds, she sighed. Tell the other dragons to make way, don't try to stop this Nisario. Let him charge into the first floor of the Dragon Sleep Shrine. They were betting on the god of the wilderness and the guardians. With just one command, Deathwing had gone on a killing spree. It was unknown what instructions Enzoth had given him, but Nisario seemed to want to vent the bitterness of being suppressed for the past few days, or as if he had begun to let loose after Duque was not around. After he appeared, he did not go straight to the Dragon's Slumber Shrine, but instead started a massacre in the sky. It was even swifter than a comet that flew across the sky and even more blazing than the sun that shone on the earth. Just the flapping of its gigantic wings in the air and the huge waves of flames that it created were enough to burn an ordinary adult pentashade giant dragon's body with lust and make it fall to the ground while screaming in pain. Not only the chromatic dragons, but all the dragon-type creatures in the air, including the twilight dragon, were burned to ashes. Ha! Ha! The entire sky of the Dragonbone Wilderness reverberated with Neltharion's wanton laughter. My brother! My sisters! For the forgotten hatred! For an even greater world I, Deathwing, have come. What about you? Do you, the Guardians, have to hide in the shell of the dragon's slumber shrine like a tortoise? The dragon's slumber shrine's response was only silence. In the sky, as long as the dragons could fly away, even the dinosaurs and other vassals of the dragons on the ground ran away. They were only responsible for fighting the Earth Elemental Army, and nothing else. Ha! Do you think you can hide from me just by hiding? And Duke Marcus, do you think your little tricks will work again this time, and you can trick me with a despicable trap? Deathwing raised its chin that was emitting a metallic luster and continued to laugh wildly. Ha! I'm different. I'm really different. In the midst of his laughter, Deathwing flapped his wings. It seemed like he was flying normally, but who knew that the earth would suddenly erupt with a loud rumble? For a moment, the earth shook. The earth was collapsing and cracking, and the Dragonbone Wilderness, which had been frozen for the past hundreds of millions of years, suddenly flashed with an ominous glow. In the northwest and northeast directions of the Dragon Slumber Shrine, there was a huge bulge. At first, it looked like two mountains rising slowly from the ground. Then, the mouths of the two mountains split open and spewed out thousands of tons of blazing magma. The two huge volcanic craters were hitting the space barrier of the Dragon Slumber Shrine at a high temperature unimaginable to mortals. Impossible! Alexstrasza and Isra exclaimed at the same time. This was just the beginning, not the end. Deathwing, who was hovering in the sky, continued to laugh wildly. Idiot! Where do you think my clone came from? Now, I'll tell you. His wings split open. They broke into thousands of pieces, and then, with a powerful and unparalleled momentum, like a cover covering the sky and earth, poured down on the circular area with a diameter of more than 10 kilometers below him. Whether it was the Earth Dragons, Dragon Men, Draconians who could not escape in time, or the dragon remains that had been sleeping in this wilderness for who knows how many years and had long become bones, all of them underwent shocking changes. Roar, roar, roar. The Tyrannosaurus Rex suddenly grew another head. It did not look like a dinosaur, but a typical black dragon head. The horned dragon with long, sharp horns suddenly split open its abdomen and turned into a terrifying monster with more than 5 mouths full of sharp teeth. The skeletons of dragons that had lost their lives for more than 10,000 years suddenly grew flesh and blood. The body with countless mouths, teeth, and tongues could not be considered a dragon at all, but a deformed one. Sinestra, who had died in the previous invasion, as well as the leaders of the Twilight Dragons, Cenarion and Variona, all stood up shakily again. After they regained their mobility, the first thing they did was to attack the dragons that were still normal near them. No matter how Nesario tormented his mutated body, it could be clearly seen that all the corpses, regardless of race, had been turned into treasures by him. There were so many humorous WMs, and a casual estimate would put the total number at more than 100,000. 100,000 corpse dragons and mutant dragons. Regardless of their quality, just the number alone far exceeded the total number of ice dragons that the Calamity Army had at its peak. Control? No need. Just these corpse dragons and mutant dragons alone. You shameless blasphemer. Alexstrasza was completely enraged when she saw this scene. Come on, Alexstrasza and Duque. I've already made my move. Didn't you want to plot against me? What tricks do you have? Just use them. Nesario yelled wildly. At this moment, Nozdormu's poker face could no longer remain calm. He said softly, Duque, what are you waiting for? Chapter 1890. Was Duque back? The answer was yes. If there was anyone who could monitor Duque's time, it had to be the Lord of Time, Nosdormu. This was different from the last time. Due to special reasons, Duque had delayed for several years and missed too many events. How could Nosdormu not learn from his mistakes this time? He had been monitoring Duque's situation the whole time. As soon as Duque successfully dealt with the signal sent by the dragon soul, he couldn't wait to pick up Duque and the other two. However, Duque didn't show up directly. He didn't even inform any of his acquaintances, nor did he let himself reconnect to the magic net. The only reason Duque went into hiding was naturally because of something more important. For this, he asked Nosdormu to let the three of them hide in the Cavern of Time. The Cavern of Time in Teneris was not only the lair of the Bronze Dragon King, but also a special place outside the world of this point in time. Even an ancient evil god like Zoth couldn't detect whether Duque had returned. Duque replied in the Bronze Dragon King's unique time transmission. "It's not time yet. Nosdormu, don't you realize that the cards are not right? It doesn't matter if it's ours or Nisario's." Nosdormu fell silent. Nisario was indeed crazy, but it wasn't the most complete and irrational kind of madness. If he, who claimed to be the Wing of Death, had attacked with his main body at the beginning of the cataclysm, perhaps he would really be completely crazy. In that case, no matter which side it would be a one-sided deal, and the outcome would be decided directly. Nisario didn't show up directly. This proved that the sinister and cunning factor was still deeply rooted in his soul. The original Nisario in history would, of course, bring the Armageddon army to the Dragon Sleep Temple because of his pride and revenge. After all, he was only injured back then, but not dead. But in this life, he was obviously more wary of Duque. That fear was deep in his bones and the deepest part of his soul. Even during the cataclysm, he had only sent a clone to Stormwind City. The last time he had come to the Dragon Slumber Temple to cause trouble, it had also been a clone, and Sinestra had been sacrificed. Duque disappeared without a trace, and the 5 new Dragon Guardians did not show up either. The Dragon Sleeping Godly Palace could not possibly announce to the public that Duque had gone back to steal the Dragon Soul 10,000 years ago, and that the 5 Dragon Kings had retreated to save their strength to cause trouble, right? Looking at it from another angle, with Sleeping Dragon's main force missing, would the cunning and careful Brother Darkwing really dare to charge in? There must be a big question mark here. Before Nisario's main body made a move, they couldn't inject the power of the 5 Dragon Kings into the soul of the giant dragon. The complete version of Giant Dragon Soul was too powerful. It was so powerful that it was like the sun that suddenly appeared in the dark night. It was an existence that could not be concealed by anything or any measure. Once Nisario was scared to the point of hiding, he would send more and more clones out to cause trouble. He could barely hold on for a short period of time, but if the number of clones increased to more than 100, there would always be a lack of defense, and the world would become more and more broken under the constant ravaging of his clones. Nosdormu finally asked, "Then, are we just going to wait like this?" "There's no need to rush. This guy who looks like his main body is very much like his real body. Don't worry, even if Enzos isn't in a hurry, Nisario himself is quite anxious. After all, his body is suffering all the time." From Nisario's main body and clones, it could be seen that his disgusting body that was constantly proliferating and splitting dragon limbs was causing him a lot of pain. Enzos would just be the mastermind behind the scenes, and it didn't matter much to him whether Nisario died or not. Brother Darkwing can't hold on by himself. It seemed like he was hesitating, but it also seemed like he was showing off. In fact, both subjective and objective factors were urging him. In the end, Nisario did not have much of a performance, and he still crashed into the Dragon Sleeping Godly Palace. "Ha! My brothers and sisters. You guys don't dare to come out. Do you think that the pitiful protective measures of the Dragon Sleeping Godly Palace can protect you and increase your chances of winning? It doesn't matter, I'll go in and drag you out. I'll tear your bodies apart and then freeze them. From today onwards, I'll eat a portion of the 5-colored Dragon King's meat every day for 10,000 years. Ha! The wings of death flapped its wings, paused for a moment, and then immediately accelerated to the limit. When such a behemoth crashed into them at a speed of more than 100 kilometers per hour, the visual shock was indeed unparalleled. Clang. The shield of the dragon's sleeping godly palace made a strange sound. It was more like the hum of metal. The scene in his field of vision seemed to be collapsing, and cracks appeared on the white snow like broken glass. That was the collapse of the space protection barrier. With the next blow, Nesario charged into the dragon's sleeping godly palace. When the space protection barrier shattered, what appeared in front of Nesario was the true appearance of the first floor of the dragon's sleeping godly palace. In the eyes of mortals, the dragon's sleeping godly palace was just a slightly more majestic building. The circular body of the tower was about 200 to 300 meters in diameter. In fact, this was wrong. In order to better communicate with mortals, the five-colored Dragon Guardian used the space protection measure to reduce the activity space of the dragon's sleeping godly palace, so that the dragon's sleeping godly palace would appear very small to the eyes of mortals. Just think about it. How could an important building specially provided for the gathering and protection of the dragons be small? Dragons would not casually use the ultimate transformation spell to transform into the size of humans. They preferred to move in their original forms. The diameter of the real dragon's sleeping godly palace alone was more than 5,000 meters, and its height was a full 500 meters. Under that almost endless momentum, mortals would only feel that they were too small when they looked at the huge golden pillars that would require 100 people to hold hands together. Not to mention humans, even the smaller dragon men and half-dragons were easily ignored. Of course, for Nesario, whose body was comparable to a small mountain, the activity space here was still a little small. What greeted him was an incomparably dazzling lightning. Boom! The lightning hammer that seemed to have come from a different world smashed into Nesario's extended chin. The lightning attack that was like a left hook smashed the dragon's iron chin in one go. Crack! There was a strange sound. It was the crisp sound of the lower jaw breaking. Torim, the guardian, had been accumulating his full strength for a long time. Not only did it directly break Nesario's lower jaw, but even the aftermath of the lightning was instantly transmitted, causing Nesario, who only had half of his body in the first floor of the dragon's sleeping godly palace, to tremble in pain due to the intense electric current. Arg! Nesario let out a scream. This was only the first blow. Torim's lightning strike was purely launched later but arrived first. The first to pounce was actually the wolf god Goldrin. Goldrin, who had used a divine spell to enlarge his body, was more than 20 meters long. Chapter 1891. Unfortunately, in front of the wings of death, whose main torso was more than 200 meters long, Goldring was still like a small puppy. Goldring flashed past like lightning. He aimed at the relatively small black dragon's neck, and indeed created a rather large wound that was 10 meters long and 3 meters wide. Originally, he thought that he could expand the wound, but unfortunately, the red and green blood that burst out of the wound and the stench alone made Goldring feel that something was wrong, and he immediately retreated. Sure enough, it was extremely corrosive blood. A random lump of blood stained the floor tiles of the temple, and in a few seconds, it corroded a large pit that could sink a buffalo. Hodier, the ice guardian, followed suit. With a precise swing of his axe, he saw the gap in Nesario's source armor and successfully caused damage. However, he was not as agile as Goldring, and the corrosive blood that splattered out directly injured him. Hodier let out two screams. The first was from being splashed with dirty blood. The second was from being hit by Nesario's dragon tail counterattack, and his bones were fractured on the spot. His entire left arm was probably crippled. Hodier's 10-story body was sent flying more than 600 meters, and he rolled on the ground 7 or 8 times before coming to a stop. Life Guardian Freya hurriedly used life magic to heal Hodier. The battle continued, and the 4 guards of Alcavan followed suit. At this moment, Nesario's body suddenly began to change shape. One after another, ferocious, long-necked snake heads formed from countless tentacles appeared on his back. Nesario, who was originally in the standard form of a dragon, suddenly turned into a creature similar to a hydra. If it weren't for his huge pair of wings, no one would have thought of him as a dragon. The 100-meter-long snake neck supported 8 mutated snake-shaped heads, which were not inferior to his main body in the slightest. He had a large scarlet mouth, and the shortest teeth were 2 meters long. Coupled with his agile and tyrannical attacks, Nisario still had the upper hand despite being outnumbered. It was clearly the 4 guards who pounced on him at the same time, but because of their body shape, angle, speed, and other factors, what seemed to be a perfect joint attack to outsiders was actually an opening for Nisario. Corellon was the first to be attacked. The Wings of Death first avoided Alcavan with its tail, and used its dragon wings to shake Turuan away. Its main head attacked Amalon, but the 8 snake heads bit at Corellon. The Flame Guardian only had time to block 3 of the heads, but a large piece of flesh was bitten off by the other 5 snake heads. When Corellon screamed and retreated, the 8 snake heads were not greedy at all. They turned around and attacked the guards one by one. Not only did they bite, but the snake heads could also spit out corrosive venom or blazing flames. In one exchange, the 4 guards were all injured and retreated. Nethererio was simply suppressing all the powerhouses and beating them up. This was not a joke. Torim, Hodier, Freya, the 4 guardians, and a group of gods of the wilderness were all gathered here. The main point was that those who were stronger than Nisario were not as fast as him, and those who were faster than him could not hurt him. Tortoise god Tatara rolled over, only to be sent flying by a tail. His tortoise shell spun on the floor in a ridiculous manner. Tatara himself was dizzy from the spinning. The only ones who could hold on for a while were the bear demon brothers. They had both speed and strength and worked well together. At least they could barely hold on under Netherario's 8 snake heads. Even so, their injuries were still accumulating rapidly. If it weren't for the powerful healers like the demigods Cenarius and Freya behind them, they would probably have been defeated in a few rounds. As for the crow goddess Iwina, well, the small dragon heads that emerged from the Wings of Death opened their mouths and spat out venom that was enough to give Iwina a hard time. While the battle on the first floor of the Wormrest Shrine was fierce, the other ancient dragons were also trying their best to resist the zombie dragons led by Sinestra. Although the combat power of these zombie dragons was not as good as before, their size and destructive power were still there. It would take some effort to get rid of them. On the top floor of the Wormrest Shrine, Alexstrasza was excited and nervous. It's him. It's definitely him. Damn it, isn't Duque back yet? He's back, Nosdormu said in a low voice. This was just a show. The 3 veteran Dragon Kings knew that Duque had returned, and their age was enough to support their acting skills. After confirming the true body of Deathwing, they naturally stopped pretending. A portal suddenly opened at the top floor. Thrall held a golden disc in his hand and strode out of the portal. "Where's Duque?" the Red Dragon Queen asked curiously. He said to prepare to deal with another strong enemy. "Let's start the ritual immediately," Thrall said in a low voice. "Another strong enemy? Who else is worthy of the word, strong enemy?" Isra was puzzled. Thrall shook his head. "I don't know either, but if one of the strongest demigods on this planet, the demigod of the weave, Duke Marcus, is serious, I'm afraid it's a strong enemy in the truest sense of the word." Nosdormu was a little nervous. Obviously, when he peeked into the future, he did not see the image of the strong enemy that Duque had mentioned. The situation had already exceeded his understanding. "We can't care about that anymore. Anyway, the agreement was for us to find a chance to start the ritual." Alexstrasza glanced at Onyxia and Thrall. "To be safe, we'll all do the essence infusion in human form." All right. The 5 dragon aspects immediately reached a consensus. Under the guidance of a mysterious force, the gorgeous platinum-colored disc slowly flew about 2 meters above the ground in the air. The 5 dragon aspects stood in 5 different directions in human form, with the standard 5 equal positions. Without further ado, 5 different colored lights emerged from the palms of the 5 dragon aspects and rushed into the platinum-colored disc. The red flame that represented life and purification. The green mist that represented dreams and illusions. The blue light that represented magic and mystery. The bronze stream that represented time and space. the yellow breath that represented the earth and the cornerstone. The 5 different types of powerful energy were injected at the same time, immediately triggering a powerful energy wave. Whether it was the wyvern fighting in the sky, the earth dragon biting and pouncing on the ground, the twilight dragon wantonly killing, or the earth elemental that was silently destroying, everyone subconsciously looked up. On the icy ground that was stained with blood, all the tiny pebbles on the ground began to spin strangely. The broken limbs and living tissues seemed to have regained life and began to tremble. Some of the tiny debris even floated up and flew into the sky, defying the laws of gravity. Nasario, who was fighting fiercely on the first floor of the temple, naturally noticed the abnormality. The air was filled with the destructive power that he was familiar with. He did not panic. Instead, he looked as if he had succeeded. Ha! As expected, Master in Zoth expected. A genius idea. You actually copied the soul of the dragon, but you did not expect that I would also calculate this. Chapter 1892. Nazario's words immediately made the hearts of the 5 dragon aspects at the top of the dragon sleep shrine jump. Nazario was already so fierce, and he still had a backup plan? Even Alexstrasza could not help but glance at her brother, Nozdormu, who was always expressionless, as if she wanted to see something from the face of the Dragon King who never revealed the direction of the future and was in charge of time. Who knew that even Nozdormu himself was shocked. The river of fate must have changed direction greatly. An existence that could be regarded as a trump card by Nazario would definitely be earth-shattering once it appeared. Even Nozdormu himself could not figure out what else could have such an effect. Duque hasn't made a move yet? Onyxia said with absolute certainty. She seemed to be stubborn, but it was more of a firm belief that had been cultivated over a long period of time. Although the initial foundation was just a pitiful relationship between a master and a mount that could be abandoned at any time, as time passed, this belief became more and more unbreakable. Thus, let's just focus on the infusion of energy essence. Alexstrasza shouted, by the way, can we increase the input power a little? Let's try. The 4 Dragon Kings nodded in unison. The fierce battle on the first floor of the Dragon Sleep Shrine continued, but more and more dragons turned their attention to the new big whirlpool, because a long, earth-shattering roar announced the appearance of a new boss. There was a pulse from the earth, which was the elemental power from the earth elemental realm. In the sea to the south of the Dragonbone Wilderness, the ancient beach that had once been swallowed by the big whirlpool rose again, and the surrounding seawater that was originally flowing clockwise became turbulent. More elemental fluctuations came, and finally converged on the throne-like stone platform that rose from the bottom of the sea. It was a huge dragon corpse. Just seeing the dragon corpse in the magic mirror made the big shots of the allied forces feel that they could not calm down. Because the dragon corpse had 5 colors, red, blue, green, black, and bronze, which corresponded to the 5-color dragon race. 5 dragon heads, 5 colors, spread all the way to the chest before they were haphazardly pieced together. On the retreating H's Bismarck, Jaina, who saw this scene, let out a scream. The next second she called out again, but this time in a pleasantly surprised voice, Duque, you're back. That's right, Duque, who had been hiding, stepped out of the portal. Yes, I'm back. At this moment, more than half of the mages in the world knew about Duque's return. That extremely powerful divine will was connected to the weave, signifying the arrival of the master of the weave. Everyone, you've worked hard. His Majesty Windrunner and I have returned. Leave the rest to us, Duque announced to the Alliance and even the entire Long Sleep Temple's communication network. This was a reassuring pill that immediately suppressed the wavering morale of the Allied army. What the hell is that? Jaina pointed at the colorful dragon carcass that looked like a salted fish on the screen. Duque bared his teeth. He wanted to say the answer, but he realized that it was wrong. He could only smile bitterly. At least I know that the black dragon head is Nefarian. At this time, there were more than a dozen magic mirrors around Duque, and the big shots of the Alliance who were qualified to attend the throne meeting were listening. When they heard this answer, everyone felt a chill. It was not their fault. Anyone who looked at another race without common sense would have faced blindness. Black dragons all looked the same. Who would have thought that not only did Nesario transform into a dragon of death, but he also caused his wife to die twice and his eldest son to come back to life again? Vashj, who was commanding the battle, shuddered. Then she snapped her fingers with one of her arms, and a female Naga swam over from the side. That Ratio's corpse from last time. Grind it into powder later. Remember, grind it fine. Then give it to the dwarves in Iron Furnace Castle to forge warhammers or something. I guess they like to produce a batch of standard Black Dragon Prince warhammers, Vashj instructed. In the video brought by the optical telescope and the mage's eye, more energy poured into the colorful corpse that was now beginning to come to life. With every passing moment, everyone felt that the monster was becoming stronger. His other limbs also began to twitch. One by one, the ugly heads were raised. Like the tentacles of a giant sea creature, they moved up and down, looked around, and opened their bloody mouths. All 10 eyes were open, and they were the same color, which contrasted sharply with the rest of his body. Every pair of eyes flashed with a dazzling purple. They were alive, moving, and even talking, but this colorful dragon was broken to the extreme. Bones could be seen in some places. The scales had fallen off, revealing healthy and withered skin. Something seemed to be missing from each head, an ear, an eye that was oozing pus. Damn it, why do I feel like we're fighting the Lich King's Scourge Legion? Gavin Rad smiled bitterly. Next to him, Tyrion Fordring slapped the back of his old friend's head. Well, the Lich King was no longer a derogatory term. On the beach, all the mouths of the colorful corpse dragon that stood up opened in unison and let out the same voice. I am Chromathus, the creation of the great dragon scientist Nefarian, the twilight of the Dragon King that ends all the glory of the Dragon King. Bastards who sit on the highest throne in the Dragonslot Temple. Are you ready to accept your doom? The Twilight domain on every Twilight dragon would resonate with this voice in a strange way, allowing the voice to spread far and wide. The voice instantly spread across the entire Dragonbone Waste. On the top floor of the temple, Alexstrasza and the other Dragon Kings were trembling. It was from anger. Of course, they knew about the existence of the colorful dragons. They were monsters stitched together from the parts of the 5 major dragon races. After Duque conquered what used to be Blackwing's Nest, he sent an official report to Alexstrasza as the commander of the alliance. The report said that the colorful dragons were all dead. But it was obvious that this strange colorful dragon was a strange existence between the living and the dead. Because Nefarian was definitely dead, but the blue dragon's head next to him should be alive. Alexstrasza recognized him. That guy was Aragos, the son of the former blue dragon king Malygos. On the other side, not to mention Alexstrasza, even Dumuk was dumbfounded when he saw that the blue dragon's dragon head was Aragos. As an old player and a transmigrator, he could not miss the most important storyline in the Cataclysm, the birth of 2 divine artifacts. One of them was the divine artifact staff, Dragon's Wrath, Terragos's soul staff. When he was a player, Duque would definitely be happy to get his hands on this divine artifact staff. After transmigrating, Duque could not do this because the blue dragon girl, Terragosa, was still alive and kicking. If it wasn't for Aragos, Terragosa wouldn't have died. That was the point. Chapter 1893. In the original history, after Malygos, the dragon aspect, was defeated by the other dragons and the heroes of the mortal races for his futile attempt to destroy all magic in the world, the Blue Dragon Legion argued endlessly about the selection of a new leader. They were divided into 2 factions, supporting the 2 most promising heirs, Kalegos, who was committed to peaceful coexistence with the other races, and Aragos, the son of Malygos, who advocated a different path away from this world. In order to end this endless debate, the Blue Dragon Legion decided to hold a ceremony at the embrace of the 2 moons. This is a special astrology in which the 2 moons of Azeroth line up. Legend has it that the Dragon Guardians were given the power to protect Azeroth at this time, to choose a new king of magic, the Blue Dragon Guardian. But the bronze dragon Anachronos found an ominous omen in this upcoming ceremony. This dragon who had witnessed endless time had an insight into the evil magical energy fluctuations near the magic pivot, which was the frozen lair of the Blue Dragon Legion in Northrend. With this discovery, he caught a glimpse of the terrible scene of Azeroth succumbing to the flames. Although the connection between this terrible omen and the Blue Dragon Legion was not clear, Anachronos still summoned some creatures that were regarded as short-lived for further investigation. If no hero could accept the challenge to find out the truth, then the destruction of Azeroth that Anachronos had foreseen could become a reality. The heroes of the mortal races found active embers in the Land of Fire, and together with the Sand of Time, they cast the Eye of Eternity. This artifact could be activated on Kadara Island, where the magic pivot was located, and reveal the past that was covered by magic. When the hero came to Kadara, Taragosa appeared. She entered the magic pivot with the hero and used the Eye of Eternity to witness the conspiracy between Aragos and the Blue Dragon Legion's mortal enemy, the fallen Black Dragon King, the Terminator Deathwing. Deathwing promised to ensure the existence of the Blue Dragon clan and Aragos' position after the world was destroyed. And Aragos promised to lead the Blue Dragon Legion to join the Terminator army after becoming the Blue Dragon King. As part of the deal, a branch of the World Tree, Nordrassil, was plucked and infused with powerful magic power. It would be sent to the Land of Fire for a ritual to burn the World Tree. Taragosa, who had witnessed all this, was in disbelief. She sent the heroes back to Nordrassil to inform Calegos, while she stayed in the magic hub to clean up the traces left by the use of the Eye of Eternity. The mortal heroes who rushed to Nordrassil met Calegos and retrieved the branch of the World Tree from the Firelands, which had been made into a staff. Having obtained clear evidence, Calegos went to Kadara and entered the magic hub with Taragosa to question Aragos. But in the process, Aragos, who was prepared, sent the Twilight Dragon to attack them. In order to protect Calegos, Taragosa sacrificed herself. In order to continue Taragos's existence, Calegos, who had escaped, used the Staff of the World Tree as a medium and used a magic ritual to bind Taragos's soul and essence to the mortal hero. This unstable magic ritual used the boiling embers of the Land of Fire to extend the effect until the Double Moon Ceremony. During the Double Moon Ceremony, the hero who had transformed into Taragosa participated in the voting for the Dragon King and witnessed Calegos' coronation as the new King of Magic. After becoming the King of Magic, Calegos completely bound Taragos's soul to the mortal hero and asked the mortal hero to go to the Land of Fire to retrieve the heart of the Fire Elemental Lord, Ragnaros. After retrieving the heart, Calegos and a few other adult blue dragons worked together in the main city of the hero to make Taragos's soul permanently reside in the hero's staff. The staff, which was once a branch of the World Tree, was thus upgraded and became a divine artifact, Wrath of the Dragon, Taragos's Staff of Spirit. In addition to possessing powerful magic power, the mortal hero could also transform into Taragos's phantom through this staff. That was the entirety of the original history. Quite a poignant story, wasn't it? In fact, as a player, Duque had always been more than willing to accept divine artifacts and staffs. Even if he had to steal or rob, he would always explore dungeons with the mentality that he had to get his hands on one. Back then, a player named Guang once said, "I'd rather let someone else ride my horse than let my undead horse be ridden by someone else." His obsession with equipment to this extent was quite exaggerated. However, it also reflected the player's mentality. As a transmigrator, Duque certainly desired divine artifacts. If he had to sacrifice a blue dragon girl in exchange for a divine artifact, Duque would rather not. He still remembered how enchanting the blue dragon girl, Taragosa, was in the form of an elf in the mission. Those long legs, that extremely exotic blue hair, and that extremely aesthetic crooked dragon horn. Although Duque didn't have the chance to peek into this mission in this life, and because of the various changes in fate caused by history, there was no chance for this mission to reappear again. However, it didn't mean that Duque had to kill a girl for the divine artifact. Such a beautiful girl, even if he didn't want to accept her, he couldn't just kill her. If it was written into a novel, killing a girl would mean losing subscriptions. Duque didn't know that because he killed Darkwing once, The result was that Darkwing was far more suspicious and crazy than in history. Originally, as the hero who led the Blue Dragons in the War of the Shifting Sands, Arygos didn't die in the War of the Shifting Sands. He was locked in the Beetle Gate and tortured by Si Thun's men for 1,000 years. In fact, he was already crazy. When Duque killed Si Thun, Arygos was rescued and returned to the Blue Dragons. Although he had the title of Blue Dragon Prince, no one in the Blue Dragons took him seriously anymore. In this life, the Blue Dragon King had nothing to do with him. Alright, Arygos did run to seek refuge with Darkwing, who knew that when Darkwing heard that Arygos wanted to seek refuge, he said on the spot, "Okay, you can contribute to my great cause of destroying the world." Arygos thought that he only needed to carry bricks at most. In the end, Nesario, the pitch-black coal boss, told him directly, "A tall building needs a strong foundation, so you can be the foundation." Arygos became the foundation. He was directly chopped into a dragon rod, his limbs and wings were cut off, and stuffed into Chromatus' body. It couldn't be helped. Even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its own children, but when Darkwing went crazy, he would even smash his wife and children. His wife had died twice and lived twice, and his son had stuffed Nefarian into the 5-colored dragon to be the dragon head, let alone a guy who was suspected to be a spy sent by Dumuk. Chapter 1894. After all, Duque was already sharpening his knife to find a traitor. Whether it was a traitor or a traitor, he would just kill the traitor. Wasn't the reason why the strongest fortress in history was breached because of internal strife? Duque had already helped Isra clean up a traitor during the recent rebellion of Fandral Staghelm. He definitely wouldn't mind doing it again. In any case, in this life, Syndagosa and Malygos had rebelled, and Duke definitely didn't mind Arygos rebelling as well. The most important thing was for their family to be neat and tidy. He didn't expect that God's plans would always go awry. Seeing that Arygos was in the 5-colored dragon Chromatus, Duke laughed like a pig on the spot. Duque was just curious. Why did Nefarian get himself into trouble? Why didn't he call this guy the colorful fish pill version of Nefarian? Why did he have to call him Chromatus according to history? After all, Chromatus had never appeared in the game. He was just a guy that existed in novels. He didn't expect the goddess of fortune to be so malicious and really let him escape. This was really... Duque didn't know where to start. Speaking of which, the general was the courage of the soldiers. In fact, when the 5-colored dragon Chromatus appeared, everyone was really scared out of their wits. But there were so many people in the command center, and they all watched their boss laugh like a pig. It was funny, but they all became calm again. "So, you know this thing? Or did you already know how to deal with it?" Queen Sylvana walked up and put her slender fingers on Duque's shoulder. Behind Queen Sylvana were Aurelia and Sasha. After settling the 2 battles, they had the mages open a portal and come over. The 3 Windrunner sisters could almost be called the 3 sisters of the Wind God. They were the right choice to fight a dragon. Seeing the eager women of the Windrunner family, Duque was a little annoyed. Most of his women were extremely powerful. Fortunately, there was a cute girl like Kalia and a silly girl like Hoof. Otherwise, life would be hard. Duque waved his hand. Focus on Deathwing. After harmonizing the power of Galakrond, Nesario is a big problem. Was there really no need to care about this Chromatus? If I'm not mistaken, it should be a combination of the 5 types of power of the 5-colored dragon. It has no weakness. Jaina pointed at the 5-colored dragon in the magic mirror. Invulnerable Meridian? Duque chuckled. Just now, I received confirmation from Alexstrasza. Apart from Nefarian and Arygos, the other 3 dragon heads belonged to 3 ancient dragons. The first one to die was Tesla, who died in the ancient war 10,000 years ago, but his body was missing. The smart Jaina immediately understood. Are you saying that they're not evenly matched? The difference was too great. Nefarian was undoubtedly one of the strongest demigod Daoists. But Arygos was more than 1 gear off, and the other 3 dragon heads were 3 gears off. It would be fine if Nefarian was the leader and the other 4 were the assistants. Unfortunately, the leader didn't want to learn, and chose to learn something similar to the soul of the dragon, hoping that this haphazardly assembled dragon body could produce the same effect as the soul of the dragon. Duque sneered. All right, everyone, I'll take the lead with the Black Edge Knights and take care of Chromatus. Then it's your turn. Everyone, get ready. The Black Edge Knights? What did this battle have to do with the Black Edge Knights? No one thought that the Death Knights could play any role in this battle against the Earth Elemental Army. At this moment, the thousands of Death Knights of the Black Edge Knights were already in position. They were in a special destroyer, Eldritch. Regardless of whether this special flying destroyer really had the theoretical invisibility ability like Duque had boasted. High Lord Darien Mograine was now under a lot of pressure. As the leader, he was stunned by the old man beside him, who did not belong to his knights, but was dressed like a Death Knight. Not only him, but all the members of the Black Edge Knights felt a strong sense of oppression on the soul level. It was as if they could not help but kneel and worship him as long as he had a thought. Sorry, Darien, I'm still not used to the control of this power. I've tried my best to suppress the leakage of soul energy, the old man said. No, it's okay. This is also a good training for us brothers. Uncle. After thinking for a long time, Darien finally called the old man uncle. Oh, it's a long time no see. The old man patted Darien's shoulder. It was a friendly gesture, but Darien felt like a grandson. What could he do? The old man was the boss. On the other side, Duque appeared. There was a loud noise in the sky, and the big boss appeared. South of the Wormwrist Shrine, in the vast sky, 4 huge phantoms suddenly appeared. They were the Wind God Throne, the Land of Fire, the Tidal Throne, and Order. The phantoms representing the 3 elemental realms spread out elemental energy channels in a way visible to the naked eye. They connected with the arcane energy channels extended by Order in the air, and finally formed a huge arcane rune circle that floated behind Duque. Duque was using this method to tell the world that he was a demigod of the weave. Chromatus, no, the black dragon in the middle, raised his head high. The moment he roared, the old man from the Alliance of Heroes recognized that it was Nefarian's voice. Duke Marcus, you were just a little mortal back then. An existence like a vermin. Do you think you can do whatever you want after mastering the power of the 3 elemental realms? The anger in the roar filled the entire world. Duke smiled and twirled the in his hand. He said, I'm sorry. With enough power, you can really do whatever you want. Of course, there's no point in giving power to trash like you. Back then, you could be overturned by a group of mortals. He was a very cool word. It could perfectly express how disdainful and arrogant the person who said it was. He was worth a book of 10,000 words. Nefarian was speechless for a moment. Immediately after, the chromatus that he formed became furious. The 4 dragon heads were raised high, and they used different words to trash talk at Duque. Nefarian, on the other hand, could not take it anymore. Stop arguing. Just use that to get rid of Duke Marcus. If he dares to leave, just destroy the Wormwrist Shrine. Chapter 1895. Roar. Along with the roar of the 5-colored dragon, the atmosphere, the seawater, and even the gravel under the 5-colored dragon's body all trembled. Mysterious powers of different characteristics gathered from all directions and converged on Chromatus' body. Around him, due to the conflict of elements, the pebbles in his field of vision began to spin and tremble strangely in midair. These pebbles had different performances. Some of them blossomed and grew plant roots. Some of them instantly became extremely old, while the other half of the pebbles were smooth as if they had been polished. Some of them flew and drew out illusory bands of light, dazzling and blurry. Some even turned into mysterious runes, turning into distorted runestones that were out of scale. One did not have to deliberately study to know that this performance was the embodiment of the 5 powers of the 5-colored dragon. The air was filled with a scent that the 5-colored dragon was familiar with. Whether it was suspicion or disbelief, Chromatus was indeed using the power of one dragon to do what the 5 dragon aspects were doing. Duque, We owe you another favor. Hurry up and kill that ugly guy. The gathering of the dragon's soul has been seriously disrupted by him. Alexstrasza sent an urgent message in a flustered and exasperated manner. Duque was speechless. He realized that he had really underestimated the intelligence of Nesario and Enzos. He had never thought that Chromatus' ultimate move would have such an effect. It could actually affect the injection of the essence of the dragon's soul through resonance. Duque's facial muscles twitched. Good. You have the biggest breasts, so you have the final say. What big breasts? The Red Dragon Queen was stunned. A slip of the tongue. Although Duque teased her, his hands did not stop moving. His entrance came with its own background music and background images. This was not used to show off. Although there were many elements of showing off, more importantly, his ultimate move was faster than Chromatus's ultimate move. Perhaps Chromatus would definitely be the top among demigods in terms of individual combat power. At the end of the day, there was a difference between a demigod who became a demigod with a physical body and a standard demigod who had a world as their foundation. In terms of the convenience of gathering the power of the world, 10 Chromatus couldn't compare to 1 Duque, not to mention the fact that Duque had used the weave in advance in the Dragon's Rest Temple. Even the Dragon's Rest Temple had opened up a mana port for Duque. Pharaoh, who had already finished setting up his base, was acting like a hooligan. In this land, Duque was no different from the pharaoh who had his own wizard tower. The violet of arcane magic, the snow white of ice, and the crimson of fire. When these three colors perfectly blended into a mysterious color that even the naked eye could not describe, the entire sky suddenly flashed with a dazzling brilliance. A gust of wind blew, spurring these three types of energy to accelerate their ejection. It was a roar different from the sound of cannons. The light of destruction formed by the convergence of the three major elements and arcane energy turned into a huge beam of light that split the sky and the earth. Like a huge spear that pierced through the sky, it ruthlessly pierced towards Chromatus, who was on the reef in the center of the sea. The energy spear directly penetrated the group of twilight dragons that were foolishly driven to the center line between the two, projecting the light of death on the ancient beach. The shining radiance of the elements connected with the light in the sky. Even from 100 miles away, one could clearly see the radiance that illuminated the sky and imagine the trembling of the earth there. If Duque was facing an ordinary enemy, then this attack would be enough to send him back to his hometown to play with his eggs. However, that was just a preemptive strike. The supreme biochemical product that could use all the attributes of the Chromatus dragons was not so easy to deal with. A huge magic circle spread out under Chromatus's huge body, almost covering the entire beach. Unbeknownst to him, there were already thousands of Twilight believers in robes and hoods surrounding Chromatus. The sound of the incantation resounded between heaven and earth, and the air resonated with it. Dazzling pillars of light pierced through the formation and flew into the air, drawing arcs in the air before finally converging on Chromatus' body. The 5 dragon heads faced Duque's direction at the same time and breathed out dragon breaths at the same time. The 5-colored dragon breaths converged near the dragon's mouth, condensing into a terrifying shockwave that was no less bright than Duque's. It easily crossed the distance of thousands of meters, like a spear of light, and accurately collided with Duque's light cannon. On one side, there were ice, fire, arcane, and air elements. On the other side, there were life, time, dreams, earth, and arcane elements. The light cannons of both sides were so dazzling and exaggerated, and the turbulence of energy during the collision was so violent and epic. Every mage and warlock watching this scene through the magic mirror went crazy with joy. They could not suppress the joy and shock in their hearts. Was this the ultimate showdown between elemental magic and mysterious power? Was this the power of Duque, who was at the top of the throne of magic, and the pentashade dragon, who was at the peak of biochemical modification? Perhaps, even after 10,000 years, they might not have the chance to witness such a breathtaking battle again. They marveled at Duque's astounding control, and also marveled at the earth-shattering power of the 5-colored dragons. In this short but intense confrontation, Duque ran into trouble. "Master!" The weave can't hold on much longer. Karthika shouted through the spiritual connection. Duque bared his teeth. Once upon a time, the magic net was solid enough as a transit and gathering point for guiding power from the elemental realm. Unfortunately, the weave was Duze's creation. It was incomparable to the elemental realm that had been around for thousands of years. It was not that the elements in the elements realm had been exhausted. Instead, it was his masterpiece that couldn't stand it anymore. This was awkward. Duque sighed in his heart, then sent a magic message. "Old friend, it's up to you." An indifferent voice came from the other end of the message. Then, a 1,000mm cannon opened fire. It was not a tungsten core armor-piercing shell, but a human cannon. It blasted out a fellow dressed in heavy black armor, dressed like a death knight. None of the members of the Destruction Army took this missile seriously. The cannonballs of the Alliance were indeed powerful and could turn many Twilight dragons into dogs. However, this was limited to adult dragons that were below the level of ancient dragons. At the level of the ancient WMs, the hardness and toughness of their scales, as well as the magic resistance of their bodies, were not something that could be penetrated by ordinary attacks. Unexpectedly, the cannon did not explode after landing. It only smashed out a huge crater. No one cared. A voice that seemed to come from the depths of hell sounded from the bottom of the crater. "Life is life. Death is death. You are a monster that transcends the boundaries of the living and the dead. Your existence has always been a mistake. In the name of the holy light, no, in the name of the king of the dead, I order you to return to nothingness." Chapter 1896. If he had the time, Duque would not mind sparring with a strong enemy like Chromatus. Unfortunately, Duque did not have the time, because when Chromatus appeared, Wings of Death on the first floor of the Wormrest Shrine went into action. His huge size gave him a great advantage in hand-to-hand combat. Moreover, he was a dragon of death, and other than soul attacks that involved the origin, no matter where he was attacked, it would not be fatal. If he was just an empty shell, the Guardians would not mind tearing him apart like scrap metal. Unfortunately, the powerful regenerative ability kept repairing his body. Although every powerhouse knew that such a high-speed regenerative body could not last for too long, no one could do anything to him before that long time was completely over. Wings of Death went on a rampage on the first floor. After he saw an opportunity, he sent the Bear brothers Yusak and User flying, and did whatever he wanted. The first person Nesario went after was Cenarius. There were only 2 strong healers in the Allied army. Freya was a 10-story tall giant, and Cenarius was the weakest. In front of a 200-meter-long dragon tail, his 4 legs were short legs. With a sweep, Cenarius' 3 legs were directly broken, and he became a noob. He did not die, but he lost the ability to move for a while. Archavon desperately blocked Wings of Death's next attack, and Goldrin rushed over, bit Noob's butt, and dragged him to the side hall of the shrine. At least there was a protective spell formation there, and it could last longer. It was common sense to kill the healer first in a group fight, and Wings of Death used this trick to the fullest. After knocking Turawan away with his claws, Wings of Death decisively gave Freya a dragon wing slap, and half of the female guardian's face was crooked. He did not linger at all, and took Torim's lightning strike head-on, and rushed to the second floor of the Wormrest Shrine. The space on the second floor was not as big as the first floor, and it was only about half the space. This was better for Wings of Death's size. The space was too small, and his huge body could not move. The space was too big, and those annoying flies had a place to hide. Once on the second floor, the smaller god of the wilderness did not dare to go up. Otherwise, what about the divine meat sauce? It was precisely the Guardian's request for help that made Duque have no choice but to act shamelessly. The one who tricked Chromatus was Uther, the Lich King who should have left history a long time ago but had become the Lich King in this world. He did not seem to have done anything. He just raised his small arm and clenched it against Chromatus' chest like the Death Knight's signature, Death's Grasp. A faint black light pierced into the chest of the multicolored dragon. The light was so plain and unadorned that the Twilight believers who were close to it could not even detect anything special about it. Some of the Twilight believers even sneered at the man who looked like a Death Knight. But what happened to Chromatus in the next second almost drove the Twilight believers crazy. Because Chromatus' entire dragon body was in trouble. This five-colored dragon should be perfect. Back then, after Enzos picked up the last of his neck and head, Nefarian was forced to work by Enzos and Nesario. The Black Dragon Prince, who was left with only a nearly annihilated soul and a dragon's neck and head, did not have the heart to die at all. With the greatest enthusiasm and the most earnest attitude, he at last produced this supreme masterpiece of his, Chromartus, which contained himself. This was a biochemical monster created after countless experiments and thousands of years of research. In order to avoid the excessive load caused by the energy conflict and the collapse of the dragon body that Chromatus put together, Nefarian also obtained the method of making the dragon soul from his father and modified a magic circle so that the power of the five-colored dragon could be fused outside the body and blasted out. This was the perfect form of existence for the five-colored dragon. As long as the output power of the five dragon heads was controlled and the power of the dragon breath was uniform, there would be no problem. In theory, this was true. But Nefarian would never have thought that there was a Lich King in this world who specialized in dealing with the dead, and he was in the Alliance. Back then, after Arthas killed the blue dragon Saffron, he turned him into a frost dragon under his control. He also controlled many dragons of death, including the queen of the blue dragon Syndagosa. This showed the Lich King's control over the dead. As a paladin with the strongest willpower, Uther did not surrender even when he was absorbed by Frostmourne. In a sense, in this world where spiritual power was power, Uther's upper limit as a Lich King was likely to be higher than Arthas's. This was something that could not be known at this stage. But with him making a move, Nefarian immediately felt that something was wrong. Originally, through the stitching of the dragon bodies and the soul fusion, the souls of the five dragons were combined into one, and their thoughts were synchronized. Who knew that at this critical moment of the ultimate move, it would suddenly collapse again? Nefarian instinctively wanted to use his own willpower to fight against the huge spiritual pressure. He failed. Just like a subdragon at the lower end of the food chain, a pure-blooded dragon at the top of the food chain had a natural fear. He could not resist the pressure from the mysterious man at all. This man was his king. He ruled his body and his soul. Every word of this man fell into his mind like an imperial edict that could not be resisted. Maybe when he had stronger soul power, he could fight against this mysterious king of the dead. Maybe his father could do it. But not him, Nefarian. Oh, no! Nefarian let out a final scream. Chromatus's soul collapsed, and naturally, the light cannon released by the five-colored dragon could not be maintained. The bystanders only saw that Dumuk's gorgeous ultimate move finally overturned Chromatus's five-colored cannon. But no one could see the role that Lich King Uther played in this. Actually, Duque did not mind letting Uther make a grand entrance and clear his name. But Uther was firmly against it. Dumuk could only be thick-skinned and keep the achievement of killing the five-colored dragon with one strike. Everyone watched in shock as the elemental light beam pierced through the black dragon's head and finally entered the huge body that was mixed with 5 different colors. The other 4 heads howled in pain and raised their necks. Their entire bodies stood up from the wet rocks on the ancient beach and fell backward. Chapter 1897. The scene was very chaotic, and it was a mess everywhere. In the airspace and ground surrounding the Dragon Sleep Temple and the ancient beach, the main battlefield was naturally Duque versus Chromatus. There was chaos all around. On this side, there were the pentashade dragons of the Dragon Sleep Temple, as well as the dragon men and draconians. There were also various dinosaurs and drakes, as well as the long-range bombardment from the Alliance's flying battleships. In the sea, there were also many Naga and Murloc troops who risked being sucked into the Great Whirlpool. On the other side, there were mainly Twilight dragons and Twilight believers riding Twilight dragons. On the ground, there were a large number of earth elemental creatures, biochemical bone dragons, and various mutant monsters. They fought in the sky, on the ground, and in the sea. Flesh and blood flew everywhere, and elements collapsed. Almost no one would notice that a guy who looked like a Death Knight turned out to be a Lich King, an existence that theoretically did not exist. Perhaps the most sharp-eyed powerhouses would notice that it was often the higher-ups of the Alliance. In any case, a large group of onlookers who were not of much help to the main battle only saw that Duque had used a terrifying move that combined the power of the three realms to instantly kill the enemy's seemingly very strong boss. In this day and age, those who could attack on a large scale were all abnormal. Those who could have abnormal destructive power were definitely big bosses. This point of view was definitely correct. Their own big boss, Duque, had instantly killed the opponent's big boss. When else would they shout 666? For a moment, the entire Alliance army was seething. Oh, boss is mighty. Long live Duke Marcus. Long live the Alliance. Not to mention the mortals on the distant battleships, the highly intelligent pentashade dragons, and even the dinosaurs and other drakes with average intelligence instinctively roared at the sky and roared. Roar, 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 roar. The roar was long and filled with savagery. Many ancient dragons could not help but recall the battle from 10,000 years ago. It was the same fight against evil, and it was the same gathering of all races. The feeling of working together was great. At this moment, Alexstrasza, who was on the top floor of the Dragon Sleep Temple, was both surprised and happy. She was happy that Duque had instantly killed the Destruction Army's backup, Chromatus. Speaking of which, Nisario also had 8 snakeheads, but Alexstrasza did not care about that kind of single-attribute snakehead. After all, no matter how strong they were only strong in physical attacks. There were many ways to deal with them. However, she really did not know how to deal with Chromatus, who could gather all 5 elements and cause a mixed reaction just like Giant Dragon Soul. She imagined that if it were the 5 dragon aspects, they would probably suffer a crushing defeat. He really didn't know how Duque defeated that monster with just 1 light cannon. At this time, she did not notice that her sister Isra's eyes were shining with a strange light. What surprised him was that Nisario was actually so powerful. There were faint signs of him breaking through all the way here. Oder had 3 guardians, and several gods of the wilderness. This kind of strength was definitely too powerful in the world. Unfortunately, he was no match for Nisario, who used his size and regenerative abilities to act like a hooligan. This was a situation where one person could defeat 10 people with great strength. When the opponent's body was too big, normal attacks were obviously not powerful enough. She wanted to speed up the infusion of energy into Colossal Dragon's Soul, but she couldn't. How much water a bucket can hold depends on the shortest piece of wood. Xianxia had actually worked very hard. Compared to her previous sloppy self, she was many times better. The Red Dragon Queen could completely imagine how much effort Duque had put in, and even paid a high price that she didn't know, to make this female black dragon, who didn't even seem to care about the destruction of the world, work hard. Unfortunately, some talent and some hurdles could not be overcome by hard work. That was inheritance. When dragons gave birth to children, they would unknowingly imprint the way they used their power into the dragon's egg. That was the inheritance of the wisdom and power of the previous generation. Or when imparting skills, these elements would be engraved into the children's souls in the form of soul imprints. Although Malygos was a little crazy, he had done enough to pass on the Blue Dragon clan's inheritance. However, when Nisario forcefully pushed Sinestra and the other female dragons, he had already gone crazy and completely abandoned the power of the Earth Guardian. This caused this power to lose its inheritance. Unless Xianxia found another way to use the power of the Earth on her own, she would never be able to reach the height that Nisario had when he was an Earth Guardian dragon. For example, if the new king of magic, Calegos, had 80% of the previous Blue Dragon King, then Xianxia would only have 70%. As a basic output of power infusion, she was qualified, and her performance was still surplus. However, in a situation where time was getting tight, she would become a fatal shortcoming if 100% of power and essence was really needed. Compared to her, Calegos' talent seemed to be activated, and his use of magical elements was becoming more flexible and smooth. It seemed that Calegos could be improved to at least 90%. Alexstrasza could only be anxious. At this moment, Sal, who had been standing at the side and being stared at by several ancient dragon guards, said, "Your Majesty Xianxia doesn't seem to have a thorough understanding of the earth. If you don't mind, I hope to help the Black Dragon Queen." Alexstrasza still had some spare time. She turned to look at Sal. "Sal, do you think I can trust you?" It was not Firebird, but the majesty of the queen had a kind of power to interrogate the soul. As the shaman of salvation, Sal naturally had a clear conscience. He looked at the Red Dragon Queen's fiery red eyes with a clear and fiery gaze. "My soul is trustworthy. Even if your Majesty Alexstrasza doesn't trust me, you should at least trust His Excellency Duke Marcus who sent me here." Sal sighed in his heart. This was the sorrow of having a relationship with the Dragon Sleep Temple too late. Back then, the Dragonmaw clan's enslavement of the Red Dragon Queen and even the Red Dragon Army made it difficult for the tribe to have a good relationship with the Red Dragon clan. It could be said that finding a starting point was too slow. Sal had no choice but to use Duque's name. At least Duque had asked Sal to send the soul of the dragon over. Arranging for him to send such an important thing proved that Duque trusted him. Unexpectedly, Xianxia also chimed in. "Duke said that you can trust Thrall, but don't trust the tribe so easily." Sal bared his teeth on the spot. He wanted to refute, but he found that what Duque said made sense. Even he himself felt that his moral integrity was above the credibility of the entire tribe. "Look at that bastard Gurus. He destroyed all the terms of cooperation with the Alliance and started a war everywhere like crazy." Sal sighed. "All right, you help." Alexstrasza finally agreed. Chapter 1898. Originally, it was already difficult enough for the 5 dragon aspects to harmonize their powers. Everyone was very worried that Thrall would cause trouble if he interfered. Thrall was very careful and meticulous. He did not affect Xianxia's dominance of the power of the earth at all. He was more like a tinker, gently collecting the power that Xianxia had missed out on due to her impatience. He slowly straightened them out and channeled them into the dragon soul. This works. The input of the 5 guardian powers increased at a speed visible to the naked eye. 71%, 75%, 82%, 90%. When it reached 90%, it was awkward. Now it was Collego's turn to be unable to keep up. At this moment, Alexstrasza suddenly received a request to enter. "Duque." "Alexstrasza, have my servant, Khadgar, fill in the missing part of the spell," Duke said through the magic transmission. "Are you sure?" The queen was shocked. Of course, what Collegos lacks is not power, but the use of power. Khadgar is the core of my magic net. I can synchronize my soul with Khadgar, but I can't send a clone to the scene. After all, I still have to help you stop Nisario. The performance of the mortal was so dazzling that it was blinding. First, it was Thrall who harmonized Xianxia's power, increasing the efficiency of the essence infusion. Now, Duque actually got a servant to help and even guaranteed it. Alexstrasza's face turned red. She looked at Isra, Nozdormu, and the other veteran dragon kings. "Okay." Khadgar, who was dressed in a magic robe, stepped out of the portal and walked over. He gently placed his hand on Collego's arm. A brand new Titan rune magic circle was forming behind Collegos and Khadgar. The magical energy that had become unstable when it reached 90% power a moment ago suddenly stabilized at a speed visible to the naked eye. This time, it was Collego's turn to blush. He suddenly realized that Khadgar's understanding and use of the Titan runes was actually above his. That meant that Duque's level was higher than his, the current king of magic. That was quite shameful. Collegos was bad at fighting, but he was at least a good comrade who was dedicated to protecting the world. With a purer temperament, he quickly calmed down and increased the power of the energy injection. 92%, 96%, 100%. He could finally pour in all his energy. "Duque, give us 10 more minutes." "No, 5 minutes is enough." Alexstrasza knew that the more time they had, the more stable the situation would be. But she really couldn't bear to put all the pressure on Duque's shoulders. This was irresponsible to their allies, as well as shaming the Dragon Slumber God Palace. She also discovered that with the addition of Khadgar and Sar, the magic and earth domains had become more stable. If Kalegos and Onyxia's draconic bodies could withstand it, she could try to inject them with around 120% of the power. This was an overload. If the situation fell into a dangerous situation, she would have to do this. At this time, the middle hall of the Dragon Slumber Shrine had already been smashed into smithereens. The smaller the space, the stronger the strengthened Brother Darkwing. Haha. Deathwing sprinted at high speed. Even though he was gliding at a low altitude close to the surface of the hall, it caused chaos in the surroundings. The smaller god of the wilderness had to dodge desperately, but the four guardians who had grown in size couldn't keep up with Brother Darkwing's agile movements. This allowed Nesario to often gain an overwhelming advantage in certain areas. This time, he grabbed the Frost Guardian Hodier with one claw and completely ignored the cold air coming from the other party. Then, he slammed Hodier into the wall of the temple like a club. While he smashed the other party into a daze, a few knuckles of his left front claw were broken. It didn't matter. The frozen limbs would collapse on their own later. Anyway, they could just regenerate. He didn't have a chance to finish off Hodier completely because he was a large giant who was hot on his heels. As soon as he leaped into the air, Deathwing made a 180-degree turn in the air that did not match his huge body size. The next second, he catapulted like a cannonball towards the Guardian of Life, Freya. Deathwing couldn't forget to finish off this female giant. Unfortunately, before he could touch Freya, he had to suffer a rather painful thunderbolt from Torim. The right side of his dragon head was charred black, and even half of his spherote metal chin was charred. He didn't care. In midair, he did a standard S-shaped snake maneuver, allowing him to avoid the two big, stupid bear demigods. This time, he aimed at the wolf god Goldring. Goldring was indeed very fast. He could use his dexterity in midair to step on the air wall and even use the wind pressure to change directions to escape. But that didn't change the fact that he was just a small wolf that was only a few meters long. When Nesario saw the opportunity, he turned around and gave an earth-shattering flap of his dragon wings. Goldring finally fell for it. Howl! The snow-white wolf silhouette with a hint of blue flew far away like a home run. At this moment, Nesario's dragon tail, which was close to his body, was suddenly hit by a hammer. A blazing hammer! It was as if a tornado was swirling up a violent flame. That kind of terrifying heat that seemed to be able to burn everything in the world was no stranger to Nesario. In his recent memory, he still remembered that he had experienced it himself. He turned his snake-like neck in bewilderment and looked behind him. Vlogger, Duque? Deathwing's dragon eyes widened in disbelief. Not to mention that he didn't believe it, many of the gods of the wilderness who had participated in the war in the Land of Fire subconsciously assumed a defensive posture. If one only looked at the scene from afar, anyone would think that the guy who appeared out of thin air in the middle of the Wormwrist Shrine, with a flaming lower body, an inverted triangular upper body, and a pair of huge, thick, flaming arms holding a huge Balrog hammer, was the former fire demon king Ragnaros. Unfortunately, the place where Sir Lager's head was supposed to be was replaced by something else. The irascible horned head and lava skull face was gone, and in its place was a throne made of flames. Who else could it be but Duke Marcus, who was watching the show with his legs crossed and one hand holding his chin? Yo! Duque raised his palm and looked like he was swearing. Sorry. It's the Duke Marcus who plotted to kill you in Lordaeron back then. If Deathwing's lungs were still used for breathing, he would most likely explode in anger on the spot. He did not care about the life and death of Ragnaros and El'Ikir. These two elemental lords were originally used by Zoth to assist him in causing trouble, so it didn't matter if they died. What he cared about was that the other party actually used the bodies of his subordinates to deal with him. Next, another enlarged replica of Al-Akir appeared. Of course, his head was replaced with Sirvanna's. What do you think of our elemental body? Chapter 1899. If Nesario's face could be black, it would be as black as the bottom of a pot. Unfortunately, he was AF** King Black Dragon himself. Had anyone ever seen a black dragon with a gigolo face in the form of a dragon? Normally speaking, the larger the size of a giant, the greater the burden. Under the influence of gravity, it was already a heavy burden to support a body that was more than 10 stories high, not to mention the nutrients that a creature needed to consume every day. For a dragon at the top of the food chain, the amount of meat that a dragon needed to eat every day was calculated in tons. Fortunately, dragons had the special trait of hibernation to reduce consumption. Otherwise, wouldn't tens of thousands of dragon mouths have eaten all the beasts in Northrend? In a sense, when it came to size, elemental creatures were cheating. As long as there was enough mental strength to control more elements, elemental creatures could theoretically make their bodies infinitely large. Just like the 4 guardians of Alkavon who could become large, they were not pure giants, but special semi-elemental life forms. It was just that the flexibility of their bones and skin determined the upper limit of their bodies. Pure elemental creatures did not have this restriction. When Duque and Queen Sylvanas appeared in the form of a 300-meter-tall elemental god, many guardians and wilderness demigods felt that they had let the adulterous couple off too easily. Now that these two fellows had become the elemental kings, they were really amazing. Nesario had sent 2 elemental lords to cause trouble, but now it seemed that he was more than just stupid. It was like giving a knife to them to slash themselves with. What was the difference between that and lifting a rock to smash one's penis? Ragnaros? Here. You 2 idiots. Even if Nesario had a good temper, he could not stand it. Besides, the Black Dragon King had always been very vengeful. Oh, your 2 former allies, if there are still ghosts left, they will cry. Duque's lips curled into a mocking smile. With a thought, the headless logger under Duque suddenly waved the huge Balrog hammer and smashed it at Nesario. This Balrog hammer was the genuine Sabra's Balrog Ragnaros hand from back then. After Magni Bronzebeard became a demigod and became a diamond man, it was transferred to his second brother, Muradin. When Duque asked to borrow it, Muradin did not hesitate to throw it to Duque. Therefore, the power of his own Balrog god with the real Balrog hammer was, of course, extraordinary. Attack! My Lager Mk2-. Duque's loud roar spread throughout the Wormrist shrine. Duque was very pleased. Men of this era all dreamed of driving a Gundam when they were young. Although he did not know which idiot said that grown men should love Zagu, Duke did not care. I want to be the only one in the world. In the Gundam Gund 3s. In the Gundam of Azul. Duke didn't like things that emitted green flames all over their bodies. The Alliance's technology wasn't that advanced either. He had to use his black technology talent to barely bring some things up to the level of World War II. The true fire elemental lord was the master of the hand of the Balrog. In fact, it would be a real waste to give this hammer to Magni. Duque knew that Magni would eventually return, but before that, he would use it first. The dazzling flames that burst forth from the Balrog hammer flashed with blazing light spots similar to the eruption of the sun. The crow god Avienna, who was flying nearby, was so frightened that her crow feathers almost fell to the ground. These were not solar spots. They were simply clusters of highly concentrated fire elements. These fireballs that were condensed to the extremes spun in midair, and then converged into one. From Duque's mouth came a cold voice that did not match the surging sea of fire. Where the Balrog hammer points is purgatory. A blazing shadow that seemed to span the heavens and the earth swept across Neltharion's large dragon body that was so exaggerated that it occupied the entire field of vision of the powerhouses. Deathwing suddenly let out a shrill scream, and the huge left wing that seemed to be able to cover a small town was broken in two. From the point of the break, all the broken limbs instantly turned into countless exploding fireballs, and slowly fell from midair. One blow blew up the wing. This was only because Neltharion's reaction was fast enough and smart enough to dodge at the last moment. Otherwise, it would have been his dragon head that was blown up. Even so, everyone still saw the hope of victory. The biggest problem with being unable to do anything to Deathwing previously was his overly strong defense and regenerative ability. In the face of the absolute destructive power created by the giant elemental god that Duque controlled, Brother Deathwing's regenerative ability was a joke. His wings indeed began to regenerate the moment they were destroyed. How could it be so easy to regrow limbs from burnt scars? The highly concentrated flames of the Balrog hammer were not something that could be bought with a single hammer. Even after the Balrog hammer had left Darkwing's body, it still inflicted continuous damage to it due to its terrifying burnout property. The powerhouses with sharp eyes could see that dragon-like limbs were constantly growing out of Deathwing's wounds, and most of them were burnt by the flames that had yet to be extinguished. The attack power was greater than the opponent's regenerative speed, and this was the real damage. At this time, Duque frowned. He found that the output of his giant god of flames, Lager, was a little insufficient. It was not his fault, but the Wyrmrest Shrine's fault. Alexstrasza and Onyxia helped him open the Wyrmrest Shrine's elemental port, but the problem was that the Wyrmrest Shrine was a standard Titan creation, and the total amount of a single element that could be transmitted into the shrine per unit of time was strictly limited. Fortunately, he had a partner by his side. Attack! Windrunner! Queen Sylvie raised her bow, and the headless Al-Thikir under her rushed forward. In fact, it was not necessary to make the giant elemental god look like Lager or Al-Thikir. The elemental creatures had such a body shape, which was related to their elemental characteristics. After hundreds of millions of years of biological evolution and natural elimination, it was basically determined that there were only a few body shapes that were more suitable. Moreover, he had just beaten up the other party not long ago, so he had a particularly deep impression of it, and it was easy to imitate. The Windrunner rushed forward, and with a wave of her hand, a large wind blade was released. The sharp air blade cut into Deathwing's right wing as if it was butter, and the result was astonishing. The initial cut was very smooth, and it felt like it was going to be cut in half. When it reached the middle of the wing, it could be clearly seen that the latter half of the wing began to change color. This was clearly the Deathwing changing its body structure, changing its elemental resistance. Unwilling to give up, Queen Sylvie immediately ordered the headless Al-Ikir to add another lightning strike. The rumbling lightning strike looked full of visual violence and beauty, but those who knew the ropes would know that it was useless. The charred black caused by the lightning strike did not spread, and the damage was the size of a basketball court. Chapter 1900. For ordinary existences, this was a fatal wound. But for the massive Deathwing, it was just a drizzle. He was as ferocious as a tiger, and dealt 250 damage in the end. It was not that Queen Sylvanas was not fierce, but Deathwing was too abnormal. There was actually such a way to completely change his body structure in just a dozen seconds, making it more conducive to dealing with elemental attacks. The high magic resistance of the five-colored dragons was fully utilized by him. Tisk! Queen Sylvanas spat fiercely. Chance! Queen Sylvanas' small setback did not disappoint the Guardians. Instead, it aroused their confidence. Their bodies were only so big, and their energy was only so much. There was no such thing as an absolutely perfect creature. Deathwing's magic resistance was high, but as a price, his physical defense would inevitably decline. Without needing anyone to remind them, the four Guardians and the Bear Brothers had already pounced on him. Ow 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 ah! Ushik used his 18 bear paws again, but without the feeling of hitting a thick rubber block like before. Deathwing's body was a lot more fragile at this moment. He easily dealt tons of damage, and dug a huge bloody hole with a diameter of 8 or 9 meters with one claw of Deathwing. Get lost! Deathwing kicked Ushik away. This was not important. The bear monsters had thick skin and flesh, and he was no longer a simple demigod. Strictly speaking, Ushik also had an elemental body, which was mainly based on physical attacks. On this side, Duque did not rashly let Headless Lager continue to attack. The system elf gave him a thorough analysis. At this time, Nesario's body was in a state of stress. No matter what kind of elemental attack it received, It would quickly change the elemental resistance of the attacked area of its body to reduce the damage. A single elemental attack would definitely not be good. I didn't expect to play a big one so soon. Duque had a playful expression on his face. There was a little madness on his face, but there was also a strong sense of confidence. Duque's empty right hand grabbed the void next to him, and suddenly the surrounding space felt like it was cracking. The magic defense system in the middle of the Wormris temple, and even the entire temple, shook slightly. On the top floor of the temple, Onyxia's eyes suddenly lit up. This is Master's true strength? The other 4 dragon kings all had surprised expressions on their faces. Fortunately, it was one of them who made the move. Otherwise, they would be in big trouble. Middle level. Spatial rifts were meant to absorb more elements. Originally, the space defense of the Dragon Slumber Shrine had automatically rejected Duque's intake of elemental energy. However, when the Titan runes that were as numerous as stars floated out of Duque's body, it seemed that the self-defense system of the Dragon Slumber Shrine was also momentarily confused. Whether it was tacit approval or approval, it was impossible to know. As a result, Duque obtained even more elemental injection rights. The highly condensed and snow-white frost elements poured into the Lager Mk2's body from the void like a flood. Under normal circumstances, water and fire were incompatible. The flourishing of the ice element would inevitably lead to the decline of the fire element. This was the law of the elements that had not changed in 10,000 years. There was only one way for the 2 elements to complement each other, and that was to use the arcane element as the core to act as a neutralizer. The arcane spell extended from the Titan's energy, coupled with ice and fire, formed something similar to the Frostfire arrow that most advanced mages used. In standard terms, at this moment, the Lager Mk2 had become a giant elemental god that was a perfect mixture of arcane energy, ice, and fire elements. The 3 colors blended together in the lower body of the headless Lager tornado. The elements that were supposed to fight to the death and consume each other became as harmonious and pleasing as 3-colored ice cream. Oh, amazing! If that's the case, then let's fuse. The fusion that Sylvanas was talking about was, of course, not something dirty. With a tap of her long legs, her graceful female body flew directly towards Duque. Accompanying her was a piece of headless arcana trash that dealt 250 damage. The powerhouse's eyes widened. They saw that the headless arcana trash had turned its body into an armor-like thing and directly covered Duque's giant elemental god. It was conceivable that once it came into contact with an enemy, the first thing that the enemy's cells would sense would be the wind element. If Nesario had really adjusted his elemental resistance according to the standard of resisting the wind element, he would definitely have been tricked to death. Dear make way. Queen Sylvanas did not care about Duque's reaction and squeezed herself onto Duque's tricolor throne. You're really? Duque's reaction was also strange. Don't you always say that Sister Kalia is the woman behind a successful man like you? Do you have any objections to me being the woman behind you from time to time? Queen Sylvanas held her head high and took the opportunity to stroke Duque's chin with a slender finger that was as tender as a spring onion. Duque felt like eating someone. Sister, let me tell you, if you flirt outside of the battlefield, you'll be F***ed. Queen Sylvanas did not show any weakness. She puffed out her chest and was clearly saying, do me on the spot if you can. You're awesome. We'll fight another day. On the other side, Nesario finally felt a great threat. He swept his dragon tail at an almost 270-degree angle and fiercely swept away the siege of the 4 guardians. When the 4 giants fell, they kept rolling on the ground because of the impact. Not only did they smash a large crater on the hard ground of the Dragon Sleep Shrine, but they also finally shoveled away all the gorgeous floor tiles. The entire Dragon Sleep Shrine became a mess. Duke Marcus, do you think you can kill me just like that? Impossible. I'm already dead. But my soul is eternal, and you can't hurt my soul even if you destroy my body. Duque bared his teeth. Why did it sound like a lowly who had her legs pulled apart and was about to be forced to say something like, you can't get my soul even if you have my body? Duque, who felt that the sky was falling, had a strange look on his face. It's the duty of the Dragon Sleep Shrine to destroy your soul. I'm only responsible for sending your soul to see the Titan who created you. Duque put his arm around Queen Sylvanas' waist, stood up, and raised his hand. Attack. Oh, Ragcharon Mk2, Queen Sylvanas' cheek muscles twitched. What the hell is this? Arcane and here, Ragnaros, Neptulin. The 3 generations. Duque said concisely. Queen Sylvanas burst out laughing. What a tasteless name. Besides, Neptulin didn't seem to be dead, right? This time, Nesario was really at his wit's end. And Zoth helped him cheat with Galakran's biological cells, but who knew that Duque would also use the 3 elemental realms against him? If it was a single attribute, he could still resist, but multiple attributes were completely out of the question. Duque was very cunning. He did not directly attack him with the elements, but used the giant elemental god to fight hand-to-hand with him. Chapter 1901. Against other guardians, Nesario could use his size and regenerative ability to abuse his opponents. Against a giant elemental god that was even larger than him, he had no temper at all. The slender bodies of dragons were destined to have no advantage in hand-to-hand combat with opponents of the same size. Deathwing was simply caught in a trap of his own making. If they were outside the temple, where there was plenty of space, he would definitely distance himself from Duque's giant elemental god and fight in the air. The funny thing was that Brother Deathwing had just used the lack of space to abuse the guardians who were smaller than him and had nowhere to hide. After such a short while, the tables had turned, and it was now Duque who was using his size to abuse him. Roar! Unwilling to be captured without a fight, Nesario suddenly twisted his body and swung his nearly 200-meter-long dragon tail. This terrifying sweep was like a landslide. Even the bravest and thickest rock-watcher, Alcaphon, had to squat down with all his might to receive it. The elemental giant that Duque and Queen Sylvanas had created together didn't even have to withstand it, let alone piss himself. Bam! It was the sound of a large mass of air rushing out. Airwall. In theory, this special defensive method was one of the weakest among all defensive spells. Normally speaking, it couldn't compare to a thick-skinned fellow like the Earth Elemental. Queen Sylvanas had a special defensive method, which was offensive defense. She secretly stuffed air blocks that were compressed and as hard as reinforced concrete next to each joint of Nesario's tail. If Brother Deathwing was still a living dragon, this little trick obviously wouldn't have affected anything. Nesario was essentially a death dragon. The muscles on his body weren't connected, and could hardly be considered his own. He could hardly feel the feedback of the nerves in various parts of his body. After all, it was uncontrollable flesh and blood, not nerves. This caused his movements to be subtly uncoordinated. Queen Sylvanas' air wall was secretly embedded into the tail joints of Deathwing like nails. When he swung his tail, every mass of compressed air burst out, directly skewing his movements. The draconic tail that seemed to be swinging at him aggressively was actually not very powerful. It did not even touch the body of the giant god of 3 elements that Duque was controlling, before it was deflected by the armor of wind, and slammed heavily onto the floor of the temple. Duque silently muttered, "I won't reimburse you for the renovation fees," as he quickly commanded the giant elemental god to charge forward. He stepped forward in a horse stance, left uppercut and right hammer. The originally insubstantial Frostfire fist was like flowing water, easily flowing past the 2 raised claws of Deathwing. Entering an area where he was unable to defend, the left fist that was like a small fortress fiercely punched the right side of Deathwing's face. Dang! A crisp sound rang out. Duque was stunned for a moment, then he cursed in his heart, "Damn, I actually forgot that he has an iron jaw." Duque immediately made the giant god turn his fist into a claw and grab the neck near the head of the winged dragon. With a turn of his body, he fiercely pressed the dragon head to the ground. Friction! Friction! The footsteps of a devil. Just like that, the giant elemental god violently pressed down on Deathwing's dragon head and pushed it along the ground. The dragon head, which was originally fierce and domineering, was like a plow that directly dug a huge trench that was 10 meters deep and more than 100 meters long on the ground of the temple. That kind of earth-shattering shock scared the guardians so much that they did not dare to go forward to help, for fear of disrupting Duque's attack rhythm and giving Deathwing a chance to counterattack. This part directly made Deathwing dizzy. It was true that he was a dead dragon, but in the process of shoveling the ground, the giant elemental god's left palm also continuously launched elemental impacts at half of his dragon face as if he was driving a pile. That kind of dizziness that went straight to the depths of his soul was not that easy to get rid of. Duque only stopped when he pushed Nesario's 500-meter-long body to the wall at the edge of the temple. The giant elemental god stepped on Nesario's neck with one foot and raised the Balrog hammer high with both hands. At this moment, there was a scream from the surroundings. It was Freya's cry of surprise. That was because Deathwing's long tail was like a scorpion swinging its tail, stabbing fiercely from behind the giant elemental god. Its target was the elemental throne where Duque and Queen Sylvanas were at the head. A person's vision had a blind spot, and in theory, Duque, who was focused on the wings of beating, could not see this insidious tail stabbing from behind. Duque saw it, and the system notification also told him. Duque did not care, because these were two supergiant elemental gods that were one. Didn't Queen Sylvanas want to be the woman behind me? Here's my chance. It did not affect the movements of Duque's Frostfire giant god in the slightest. The wind armor that was originally circling around the Frostfire giant god condensed on its own. It looked as if the giant god of Frostfire had grown two wind hands on his back. These two wind elemental arms were condensed and compressed to the maximum, and in a movement similar to a crosslock, they clamped down on the tail of Deathwing. Well done. Duke praised from the bottom of his heart. Of course, who do you think I am? I'm Sylvanas. Queen Sylvanas raised her chin proudly. On the other side, the gigantic infernal devil hammer, which was like a volcanic collapse, finally fell. The huge hammer emitted an ultra-high temperature of tens of thousands of degrees. On the dark and golden hammerhead, every bump was the size of a light tank. When the hammer fell, not only did it display indescribable horror, but it was also an extreme experience after the violent combination of mass and speed. Time seemed to be frozen. No, Nesario struggled endlessly, his limbs scratching wildly like a dog. Queen Sylvanas could let the headless arcane trash carry his tail, but she could not deal with his limbs. The four limbs that were as thick as pillars, under the guidance of the sharp claws, finally pierced someone's god Mk3 the moment before the hammer fell. But so what? Elemental creatures could not be killed by physical attacks alone without eliminating the energy they contained. Nesario screamed in agony, because his limbs that had pierced through the giant elemental god's body had invaded the giant god of frost and fire with the power of twilight. In turn, his limbs were also attacked by arcane spells, ice and fire. The intense pain on the soul level almost made him subconsciously want to retract his claws. There's no chance. The hammer fell directly. Watch me smash your dog head. Duque roared. Bang! The black dragon head that was as huge as a hill was directly blown up by Duque's Frostfire giant god's hammer. The dragon teeth that flew everywhere produced a terrifying effect that was like a bombardment. There were splattered flesh and blood, dirty fragments, and still wildly proliferating biological tissues everywhere. Even so, Brother Deathwing was still not done such asterisk ting. Seeing Deathwing, who had lost his dragon head, still continuously thrashing the giant elemental god with his limbs and tail, the surrounding guardians were dumbfounded. Chapter 1902. Should I say, as expected of the Dragon of Death? Even though the dragon's head was gone, it was still coming back to life. This was not a twitch of nerves after death, but this guy was really not done with this H*T. I'm immortal. Don't even think about destroying me. I'll resurrect right away for you to see. In Nesario's chest, his soul was still roaring. While the other guardians were still in a daze, Duque's scolding woke them up. What are you waiting for? Come and dismantle his elemental armor. This thing is too thick. The power of the dragon's soul can't really penetrate his soul. It turned out that history was like that. The death ray shot out by the dragon's soul actually did not hit the sh*T. Everyone had no choice but to chase him all the way to the great whirlpool in the middle of the endless ocean. Only then did they work together to destroy him. When it came to the sea, Duque's scalp went numb. The ancient god Nzoth, known as the crazy tentacle demon, was like the sword of Damocles, always hanging over the heads of every powerhouse. Who knew if they could really kill Nesario like in history if they ran to the great whirlpool? If they could kill him here, they would definitely not have to go into overtime. Moreover, the dragon's soul split into two was definitely not as good as the soul imprint. Perhaps it was because they had forcefully charged the dragon's soul that the dragon aspect had completely lost the power that the Titans had bestowed upon them. Now that Nesario had lost his head, he was like a piece of meat on a chopping board. He could not be cut, cooked, or chewed. He was shameless and refused to type GG amidst laughter and laughter, declaring that he was done for. Duque was not going to be polite with him. Armor break. Armor break. Armor break. I've broken 5. Brothers, do it. Duque shouted excitedly. So what if he resisted? If shouting at Yamate worked, there would be no need for police in this world. Lie down obediently and let me break your armor. Wait, I seem to have taken the wrong script. Forget it, whatever. I'll torture this guy to death first. The giant elemental hand savagely tore apart the elemental armor embedded in Deathwing's body. This thing was a good thing. As long as it was thick enough, it could block almost any cannonball or elemental attack. Fortunately, Darkwing was still a dragon, and the Twilight Believers could not find more elemental armor to cover his entire body. They could only put it on the most important parts of his body. Now that the giant elemental god was fiercely tearing at it, it was even more painful than grinding Deathwing's soul. Back then, he had used an origin substance nail that was even longer than a battering ram to forcefully drive it into his body. Now that Duque had pulled it out, it was even more painful than cutting his own flesh. Duque wasn't the only one who made a move. The other guardians also swarmed forward. Those with strength, such as the 4 guards and the bear monster brothers, came up to help skin and break the armor. Those who were weaker would attack the origin substance armor and the veins between the flesh and the origin substance. He didn't know how the Dark Wings did it, but the armor pieces were completely embedded into the dragon's flesh, becoming a part of the dragon's skin. Tearing off the armor, which was at least 10 meters by 10 meters, was like tearing off the skin and flesh together. When it was pulled out, it was still connected to a large number of muscles that were constantly emitting poisonous gas and spraying corrosive liquid. Torim, Wolf God Goldring, Tortola, and the others helped cut off the muscles and flesh. In this situation, these guys from the Justice Camp were like piranhas swarming forward. But it hurts. Bastard. I'll kill you. I'll definitely kill you. I'm going to annihilate your soul. Put you in a small box. It was already a piece of meat, but Nesario's soul was still cursing. Soon the first claw was removed, then the second. Finally, even the dragon's tail was chopped off, leaving behind a ridiculous body and a new head that had just grown back. Even the scales were soft. Ushik slapped Brother Deathwing a few times and easily performed a few failed plastic surgeries on Deathwing. Nesario, who claimed to be the Wing of Death, looked very ridiculous. At this moment, a brilliant light shone through the ceiling of the middle layer. Alexstrasza, who was holding a small platinum disc in her claws, brought the 4 dragon kings, flapped her wide wings, and slowly descended. It's over? Isara's voice was filled with infinite surprise. No, we were just waiting for you guys. Duque spread his hands, looking as if he deserved a slap. Alexstrasza smiled bitterly. It feels like we've all become foils. Nosdorm looked at Duque with a complicated gaze. This was quite rare for the Time King, whose emotions were as calm as an ancient well most of the time. Not at all. Without a fully charged soul of the giant dragon, this guy is immortal. Duque spoke the truth. Yo, Alexstrasza, you guys discuss who's going to give your brother the final blow. No one can kill me, Nesario was still roaring when Hodier slapped him and gave him a frosty suture of his mouth. Perhaps it could only last for a while, but it was enough. The three veteran dragon aspects looked at each other, and the final result was a slightly dejected release. Alexstrasza raised her huge dragon head with beautiful horns, and her orange-yellow eyes revealed sorrow and reluctance. We hated him, and we killed him with our own hands once. When he died the first time, we were relieved. If we had a choice, we didn't want to kill him a second time. You do it. Nosdorm suddenly said. Me? Duque was a little surprised, but also a little enlightened. Isra said, killing the Terminator, Nesario. Regardless of whether it was your strategy or your leading role in saving the world, you deserve this honor. Since the three veteran Dragon Kings said so, the junior Collegos naturally had no objections. As for the remaining Black Dragon Queen, Onyxia, why the hell are you wagging your tail? Are you a dog? Looking around, be it the Guardians or the God of the Wilderness, everyone looked at him approvingly. Indeed, it was Duque who saved so many powerful beings and brought them together to form an invincible and powerful force. If it were someone else, they might not have objected openly, but they would definitely be unhappy. Duque, everyone returns. Duque had a strong point. When it was time to show off, he would never be ashamed. Controlling the tri-elemental giant god, Duque strode over and solemnly took the soul of the dragon from the Red Dragon Queen's hands. This was a complete version of the Super Dragon race's artifact. There were no additives or side effects. Everything would be fine as long as it was pointed at a certain dragon. Duque took a deep breath and calmly said to himself, "Congratulations, Nesario, you won the Oscar for Battle of the Ancients Azeroth, but it's all over." Chapter 1903. He raised his hands high, and the platinum disc in his hands suddenly emitted a dazzling glow. The dazzling holy golden light even penetrated through the Dragonbone Wasteland and illuminated the entire Dragonbone Wasteland. The once snow-white Dragonbone Wasteland, which was already stained with all kinds of blood, was like a mirror, reflecting the golden light that lit up the entire sky. The Twilight Dragons who were roaring and fighting widened their eyes, and their pupils were filled with panic. At that moment, all the Twilight Dragons and Twilight Believers felt the trembling of the strings of fate. The path of victory in their hearts was deviating, and there was a stronger force that made the fate of destruction of this world leave them in fear. It was as if a new fate was descending, and it was leading the future with an uncontrollable mysterious power, erasing all the other branches of fate, and forcing the path of fate to become one. In the deep rock continent, in the hundreds of Twilight temples, the Twilight Believers were praying in unison as usual. However, the Twilight bishops in dark robes opened their eyes in horror, because they found that the soul of the Oracle of Annihilation in their hearts, the wings of death, Nesario, was no longer responding. The only explanation was that the eternal and immortal dragon of annihilation, announced by the great god Enzoth, had been destroyed. It was real. When Duke raised the giant dragon soul up high and activated the exaggerated Titan divine power, every living being in the Dragonbone Wasteland that was already in the middle of the day saw an incomparably dazzling golden light penetrating through the thick clouds and descending from the sky. That golden pillar of light was like a golden spear that was burning with raging flames used by a god. It pierced through the sky and illuminated the entire sky. Rustle, rustle, rustle. The entire world of Azeroth shook. It was as if the will of the entire planet was permeating the sky, and she was looking at these warriors who maintained the peace of the world with loving eyes. In the Dragonsleep Temple, every guardian, watchman, god of the wilderness, and demigod looked at the scene in front of them in shock. The death wing of the evil dragon, Nesario, who had set off a destructive storm in the entire Azeroth, did not escape justice after all. In the glorious golden light of the dragon soul, his entire dragon began to shrink, and shrink again. The increase in size brought by Galakron was mercilessly erased. In the end, his size returned to normal, and he became an ordinary dragon aspect that was only a few dozen meters long. Then, his whole body turned into a golden dragon. In the end, all of the golden light dissipated in the breeze that blew through the hall. It's over. Alexstrasza's voice contained a hint of sadness. Yeah. Isra exclaimed. Be it the past, present, or future, the black dragon, Neltharion, has disappeared from the timeline forever, said Nosdorm, who was most qualified to make a final conclusion. Duque sighed with emotion. It's finally done. Sigh, it was just that the price he had to pay was a little too high. All the dragon aspects have lost the power bestowed by the Titans, Duque said subconsciously. Who knew that accidents would happen at unexpected times? Wait, who did you say lost all power? Alexstrasza was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, and her entire dragon body jumped up. Isra suddenly turned into his human form and floated in front of Duque. He held his right elbow with his left hand and his cheek with his right hand. Yo, Duque, did you mistake some of the fragments of fate that you peeped into with us? Nosdorm's face was sullen, and he said pointedly, if there were only 4 dragon aspects, and the dragon soul was used twice in a row, it might have really exhausted all of our Titan divine power. Now we still have about 20% of the Titan divine power. Kalegos was very straightforward. I'm a little weaker, I only have 10% left. Onyxia flew over and directly turned into Countess Katrana. She eagerly hugged Duque's left hand. Master, the power of Earth in my bloodline is all used up. You won't blame me, right? Duque was a little embarrassed, but this was also good. At this time, he was absolutely sure that the scales of fate had definitely changed again. This should be a good thing. Alexstrasza was still the one who understood the big picture. She looked around. We'll talk about these small things later. Right now, it seems that there are still many bastards who dared to offend the Sleeping Dragon Temple who are preparing to escape. As the Supreme Commander of the Sleeping Dragon Coalition Army, I declare, kill them all. This time, Brother Mooning did bring a lot of helpers. Overseer Jonas, Sleepless Josahi, Master of War Black Cove, these were all famous bosses in history, but unfortunately, under the encirclement of an even more aggressive and powerful allied army, they were nothing more than fodder. The cataclysm was basically over. Although it was basically over, it was mainly because there were still some finishing touches left. For example, the deep rock continent where the Earth elemental world was located, and the elimination of the numerous Twilight believers. In Duque's eyes, these were all F*King, not the main point. The main point was that Nosdormu came directly to Duque, which was rare. Come with me. What is it? It's about your advancement to true God. Nosdormu's words made the great hero, the Alliance commander, and the demigod of the weave, Duque, follow him eagerly. They directly teleported to the Cavern of Time in the Tanaris Desert, and Duque saw Nosdormu in human form. He was still the bronze-skinned male elf with a long braid. How much do you know about the future of Azeroth? Nosdormu asked straightforwardly. Duque was stunned for a moment, and replied tactfully, enough. Nosdormu seemed to be sneering, but it also seemed like he wasn't smiling. Don't tell me that you can peep into the distant future from the River of Time with just one time travel. Duque was silent. He didn't know if his identity as a transmigrator could really be honest with the Lord of Time, who had incomparably sensitive power. Would he be treated as a scourge that destroyed history and time, and suddenly be surrounded by the bronze dragons? This was something that no one could say for sure. Duke Marcus, you're undoubtedly the biggest variable in this point of time that I control. I used to think that you were a spy sent by the Eternal Dragon Army that destroyed time. Nosdormu seemed to be reminiscing. I've checked it over 1,000 times, and I found that this time, this world has completely accepted your existence. My duty is only to protect this world's time. Since the world has accepted you, and you're not an existence that violates the Titan's duty to me, I've always acquiesced to your actions. Duque, do you remember our conversation many years ago? Duque nodded. Chapter 1904. Come to think of it, I actually have a vested interest. More than 10 years ago, you brought me Nisario in advance as my collection in the caverns of time. Now you've indirectly extended my life. If it's just a boring continuation, then eternal life is just a kind of torture. But you let me see a future full of changes, and that's what I'm most happy about. The elf-shaped Nosdormu touched his chest. Only an unknown future can make me feel that my heartbeat isn't fake. I'm a real life, and not a slave that keeps repeating the future and locking history. I'm happy that you're happy, Duque replied in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. Since you made Onyxia a dragon aspect, indirectly allowing me to preserve enough power to continue protecting this timeline, then I'll give it to you. As a reward for changing the future, I can tell you why you can't become a god with the elements. What? Duque was shocked. This time, Duque was really surprised. From becoming a demigod to standing at the peak of the demigod realm, and indirectly or directly controlling the 3 elemental realms, Duque still did not understand the true path. Regarding the process of history, Duque knew like the back of his hand. However, regarding the path to becoming stronger, Duque could be said to be completely clueless. It was as if God had covered a piece of plastic wrap in front of him and forgot to remove it. It became more and more hazy and confused. At this moment, Nosdormu suddenly jumped out and told him that he knew the reason. It would be strange if Duque was not ecstatic. If Nosdormu was not a male dragon, Duque would have rushed up and kissed him a few times. Duque suppressed his excitement and secretly clenched his fists as he listened to Nosdormu's words. Nosdormu did not play any pranks to keep him in suspense. He was not that kind of dragon, so he directly revealed the mystery. Because even if you control all the water and fire elements in this world, you only have 1% of the true reserves of Azeroth. It's a miracle that you can become a demigod with so few elements. Ah? Duque was shocked. The next second he suddenly realized what Nosdorm meant. Nosdormu was the king of time, so he naturally controlled the mysteries of time. Of course, he wasn't talking about the Azeroth. After Duque had mastered the water and fire realms, he had begun to connect the water and fire elements of the entire planet. It was only a matter of time before he could master all the elements. Nosdorm was obviously talking about something else. In the original history, after the brainless Howl was overthrown, he was not executed. Instead, he left behind a scourge. He was secretly released, and with the help of the traitor of the Bronze Dragon, he escaped to another rather important timeline. In that timeline, Brainless Roar returned to the first orc who drank the devil's blood, which was his father, Grandpa Roar. Because he was familiar with his father, he easily gained Master Howl's trust and directly changed the course of history. Brainless Roar used the black technology that he had obtained from the goblins in the original world to directly change the history of the orcs. Finally, at the time of the King of Draenor, he reconnected the branch timelines to the world of the main timeline. Through the Dark Portal, he killed millions of orcs with black technology and almost completed the great cause of overthrowing the Alliance and Horde in the main timeline. With this memory and Nosdorm's reminder, Duque understood. Duque was shocked. You mean the water, fire, and arcane elements in the other timelines? Isn't this the main timeline? The main timeline should have the largest share of elements, right? Nosdorm laughed. The largest? That's right. At this point in time, there are a total of more than 108,000 branch timelines. One main timeline can have 1%. What else do you want? Duque's face turned green. Could it be that after working hard for more than 20 years, he had only changed 1% of this world? Nosdormu stopped his train of thought before he could even think about it. Don't think too much. The world has accepted your changes in the main timeline. In fact, the entire world's timeline with the Azeroth as its core is already converging. Nosdorm raised his hand, and Duque saw the countless white lines in the void that were originally parallel to each other slowly converging and finally merging like rivers flowing into the sea. The final timeline will all merge into one? Duque muttered. The Bronze Dragon King continued speaking in one breath. That's right. I don't know where you got your knowledge of time and space. Normally, mortals can't have such knowledge. If you don't tell me where you came from, I won't ask. Anyway, it's convenient for us to communicate. The world of Azeroth has already realized the threat of the Burning Legion. It is gathering the timelines. This is to gather all of its forces in order to deal with the enemy's attack. If there is a huge difference in the timelines, there will often be a huge conflict when they merge, and the world in one of the timelines might even collapse. However, the world itself has an extremely perfect method for the merging of the timelines. Don't worry. To mortals, this process is more like a silent merging. That is to merge the timelines that are not too different first. For example, if there is a difference of less than 10% between two timelines, then it is a peaceful merging. Usually, in a main timeline, those mortals will suddenly feel that they have more memories. From then on, this history that actually exists in another timeline will become all of their memories and continue to develop this timeline. Generally speaking, using a more powerful and main timeline as the foundation for the merging and merging other timelines can achieve a 99% peaceful merging. When Nosdorm said this, Duque already knew what he was going to say next. If the merging can't be resolved in a peaceful way, then directly use a reasonable reason to make the two worlds clash. The world will directly drive any side to destroy the other side, turning the loser into the real history, and allowing the winner's timeline to continue to evolve. Of course, if the world's will doesn't like the current evolution of the main timeline, it might send someone with the opportunity to change fate to another timeline to create a new history. Hearing this, Duque's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Nosdorm was talking about the official transmigrator of history, Braindead Roar? However, Braindead Roar didn't do anything good. In the end, he transmigrated and ultimately failed. This time, he was completely destroyed. Duque said, "All right, what do you hope or think I should do?" Nosdorm smiled. His smile was as pure as a fox's. You can jump to other timelines and merge all the timelines into one. Then, you can dominate the elemental power there. Then you will have enough power to become a true god. Chapter 1905. What the hell? That's a good idea. But, hey, Nosdormu, aren't you the guardian of time? If you encourage me to go to other timelines, aren't you the one who's going against me? You have your own will and ideals in other timelines, right? Duque was a little embarrassed. Nosdormu nodded and waved his hand, conjuring a sofa made of sand. He sat down casually. That's for sure. Every Nosdormu has his own ideals. Perhaps some will be willing to let you go to other timelines to change your fate. Perhaps some will see you as a malignant tumor of time and attack you on the same level as the Eternal Dragon Army. Ma told me that it's better to listen to the words before the but. What does their ideals have to do with me? It's not like I have to protect it. And for me, my fate, normally speaking, is only maintained until my future self comes to challenge my present self to a duel and finally perish together. Nosdormu smiled, which was rare for him. According to the mission the Titans gave me, after I die, I should calmly hand over the protection of time and the creation of the future to the mortals. So, I have to hand over my life and power. You happen to be the most talented and the strongest time magician and guardian in this world. I have no problem handing it over to you. Although Nosdormu's explanation was a little confusing, Duque understood Nosdormu's attitude. He would continue to protect Azeroth and was happy to see changes and new ideas. Facing such a reasonable Bronze Dragon King, Duque really wanted to ask if he could give him another dozen. Nosdormu jumped down from the sofa and got into a fighting stance. Next, fight with you. How much time power you learn will depend on your talent. If you don't have enough time power, I won't let you go to other timelines. Because once you die, you will be destroyed in the river of time. It will even endanger the progress of the main timeline. What if I can't learn it? Duque asked. Then stay in the main timeline and do your job of creating the future. As for the conflicts between the different timelines, it's none of your business. You can forget about becoming a real god so easily. Of course, you can fight me as many times as you want, as long as you have the spirit and time, Nosdormu said seriously. Very reasonable. I accept. Then, Dumuk was defeated by Nozdormu in one round. This was Nozdormu's home ground, where he was the master of time. Don't look at how Duque was acting all high and mighty outside, using a giant elemental god to beat up Deathwing. But it didn't work here. Unless Duque wanted to destroy the entire Cavern of Time with a massive amount of water and fire elemental essence, forcefully stirring space-time into a chaotic state, Duque would have to fight according to Nozdormu's law of time. What is time? Nozdorm began his performance. Duke threw out a large fireball to test the waters. In the next instant, a huge fireball came towards him, and Duque was directly hit by it. Bang! Duque opened his magic shield in 1,000th of a second and then activated Ice Barrier. Unfortunately, it was of little use. A sharp pain came instantly. He hadn't felt this kind of injury in a long time. Cough, cough, cough. Duque's entire body began to twitch. Only then did his mind activate the system genie and replay what had just happened. Scene 1. Duque threw a large fireball. Scene 2. Nozdormu stopped time and moved Duque over, making Duque eat his own large fireball. Scene 3. A mysterious halo flashed, and Duque could clearly feel that his strength had greatly decreased in the scene. If he guessed correctly, it should be that Nozdormu used time to temporarily degenerate his strength, causing his strength to drop to the level before he became a demigod. That was a demigod-level large fireball. Just a little bit more, and Duque would have bid farewell to his life, which he hadn't seen in a long time. While he typed GG in the midst of laughter, he didn't even know if his corpse could run away. Looking at the miserable Duque who was about to turn into charcoal, Nozdormu waved his hand and sent Duque away. That's all for today. You can go back first. I know you have a lot of mortal affairs to take care of. Finish dealing with them first, arrange everything, and then come here to focus on training. Okay. Feeling the return of his strength, Duque now had the body of a demigod, and this injury could only be described as pain. When Duque used the elements to fully repair his injury, all that was left was the memory of the pain. Coming out of the Cavern of Time, Duque let out a long sigh of relief. As expected, the path to becoming a true god isn't so simple. This can also be considered a challenge. Because the cataclysm was dealt with cleanly, Azeroth finally returned to its long-lost peace. The cataclysm was over, but the damage to the Earth was still not easily healed. Thrall used the Ring of Earth organization as a foundation to carry out various work, and at the same time, tried to reconcile the conflict between the Alliance and the Horde. Duque's response was neither soft nor hard. Talk? Sure, let Gurus find a neutral place to talk to me. As the commander of the Alliance, I will talk to him as an equal. With Duque's current status, being willing to make such a promise was already giving Thrall face. Unfortunately, when Thrall returned to Orgrim, he was met with failure. Brainless Roar not only ridiculed Thrall's incompetence, saying that Thrall abandoned the Horde in search of power, but still achieved nothing. He did not appease the rioting elements, nor did he become a demigod. He completely rejected all of Thrall's suggestions. Seeing Thrall's return, Tauren Magatha Grim Totem also secretly encouraged a group of orc chiefs, hoping to pass a motion. Those who had been great chiefs were not qualified to challenge Makra, because this represented the incompetence of the former great chiefs. Originally, this motion had a high chance of passing, but Brainless Roar rejected it himself. Come on. If Thrall asks to challenge me with Makra, then I will choose to accept. I will let him see that only the strongest warrior is qualified to lead the Horde forward. In fact, in the current Horde, there were not many people who wanted Thrall to return. This was because the opponents had all led their own tribes away from the Horde, leaving behind most of the new generation of traditional orcs. These simple-minded people could not see how much the Horde had sacrificed to eliminate the traitor, Gudjal. They only saw that they had gained a lot as the victors. Hundreds of thousands of people died. Of course, the food pressure was reduced. In addition, after occupying the oasis in the Great Rift Valley in the Barren Lands, because of the special climate there, the trees were in a state of crazy growth. The horde was able to use the wood to rebuild Orgrim. Gersa's reputation did not fall, but rose. Chapter 1906. The livelihood of the tribe was restored to balance. Most of the beastmen were very simple-minded. They did not see that this was at the expense of the overall strength of the tribe and the weakening of its war potential in exchange for a good life. The people were so simple. As long as they could get by, there would be no complaints. Garusha's reputation was rising steadily. Seeing this, Sal could only helplessly retreat to the second line. By borrowing the merit of the dragon soul to help with work, Sal was finally able to establish a connection with the Wormrist temple. However, the relationship did not go any further. Alexstrasza, who was in charge of life, acknowledged the Ring of Earth, but was far from being particularly appreciative. The focus of the dragon aspect was to protect the planet. In this regard, the Alliance did a good job, while the tribe lagged far behind. The strength and recent actions of the tribe made the tribe still a dispensable existence in the eyes of the Wormrist Temple's dragons. The Alliance ushered in a new period of rapid development. After confirming Nisario's death, Duque used his superb political and economic skills to adjust the Alliance's economy from a wartime economy to promoting technological and economic development in just 1 month. In the form of public bidding, it was announced that in the next 10 years, more than 50,000 kilometers of railways would be built throughout the Eastern Kingdom and Northrend, and train stations would be built in every town with a population of more than 1,000. It did not matter if the countries could not pay. All the money would be advanced by the wealthiest countries or organizations in the Alliance. In exchange, the countries that built the railways would give tax, tariff, and market concessions, as well as a time-limited market monopoly. During the monopoly period, the market would be in a state of monopoly. In fact, Duque was playing with the one belt, one road of the former Celestial Empire. This was a form of win-win. With transportation settled, there would be logistics and commercial circulation. The people would naturally become richer and their lives better. With money, the economy, industry, and technology could be developed. In fact, the Marcus family, Kultiras, and Alterac, the 3 richest families in the Alliance, were earning more and more money. With the military strength of the Alliance as a backing and guarantee, they also contributed the most to the Alliance membership fees. This allowed the Alliance to have money to purchase all kinds of mineral resources on a large scale. In the name of the Alliance, Duque placed a large number of industrial orders with Iron Stove Fort and Stormwind. From the simplest long swords and axes to conventional cargo ships and diesel vehicles, to the military industry's tanks and flying battleships. The huge orders would make the countries that were willing to industrialize, be it the government or the private sector, all of them would make a lot of money. Duque also took care of the tolerance of the various countries and races. The union fees could be adjusted every year, or even every quarter after negotiation, to ensure that the costs were within the range of the Alliance's ability to enjoy the benefits of the global economic integration within the Alliance, while also being able to take on enough obligations. If he didn't have money, he could give them mineral resources. If he didn't even have that, he could give them to people. Regardless of whether it was the Guardian Fortress of the Dark Portal or other places, they all required a large number of soldiers. Duque even set the proportion and degree of military training that the people received as part of the Union's dues. It was obvious that they were preparing for war. Usually, the Alliance didn't have that many soldiers, but once the war started, they would realize that everyone was a soldier. The recruit training was also divided into 2 parts. Some of the more traditional ones would train for warriors, mages, hunters, and other professions. Those with better brains would be taught car soldiers, tank soldiers, and even sailors and aviation training. After completing the training, they would practice with old models of equipment. Only the most outstanding soldiers would be accepted into the Alliance's army, while the others would be assigned to the private sector. For example, the ships would be transferred to the Alliance's regular routes to Darnassus and Exodar. Those who drove tanks would first make do with bulldozers. Those who flew battleships would be sent to survey the map. Not only did Duque hide wealth from the people, but he also hid soldiers from the people. Time passed day by day. The Dark Portal January 27th. First, the Alliance passed the latest bill. Due to the continuous years of war, too many young men died in battle, resulting in more women than men, causing a series of social problems. The Alliance did not force the countries to open up polygamy to replenish the population. At the same time, the Alliance would give special subsidies to the Alliance's soldiers according to their military rank, including high maternity subsidies. If the soldiers had 2 or more children, the women in the family would receive a series of financial subsidies and benefits that could easily support the children without working. This stimulated the enthusiasm of young girls to marry soldiers. However, this was ridiculed by many as a certain Alliance commander wanting to legally open a harem. Hence, the nickname of this bill became the famous Harem Bill. Because on February 14th, Duque stretched his head and pulled back, and all kinds of procrastination symptoms acted up, but he still couldn't escape that knife. He got married. In Stormwind City, Duque really did marry 4 queens in one go this time. As a citizen of Stormwind City, this day was full of pride. Because their own Duke, Duke Marcus, had married 4 queens in one go. On the top platform of the high-level officials and guests from various countries gathered to witness this spectacular scene that was rarely seen in 10,000 years. In the Alliance, and even in all of Azeroth, there would not be a wedding of a higher standard than this. The people who attended the wedding were the 3 queens of the Sleeping Dragon Temple, Alexstrasza, Isra, and Onyxia. They appeared in human form, especially the first 2. The huge dragon horns on their heads caused many people to be inwardly shocked. Guardians of Odor, Torim, Freya, and Mimiron. The first 2 were too huge, so they could only stand on the mountain next to the eye. The 4 guardians of Alkavon. The Earth Elemental World, the newly subdued Lord Serathane. The Water Elemental World, the former Lord Neptulin. The Fire Elemental World, the current Lord Majordomo. The Wind Elemental World, the liberated Wind Prince Thunderin, who became Queen Syria's deputy. And all the kings and leaders of the Alliance. The last one was the chief of the front tribe, Thrall. In a sense, if all the big bosses here were destroyed, not only the Alliance, but the world would also be finished. Of course, this was just a joke, because almost all the best fighters in the world were here. Other than the 3 big bosses of the Burning Legion at their peak, who else could deal with these guys? The bridegroom is in place. Play music to welcome the brides. The ceremonial officer was Stormwind King Varian Rin. What could he do? He was Duke's junior, so he couldn't refuse. The melodious wedding march sounded from the royal orchestra. Thump, 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 thump. Hearing this beautiful melody, everyone couldn't help but imagine the following scenes in their minds. Marriage, sweetness, love, how beautiful! 36 innocent, lively, and cute children formed a choir and sang in unison, hand over the money, hurry up and hand over the money, all the big bosses. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.